can't believe that this guy he's lifting, look in this comic, he's lifting up a car. Whoa, this is a guy lifting up a car? That's impossible.
Hello and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
And today we're doing another how-to episode of the podcast. This week, instead of how to get into anime, this is how to get into comics. This is our expertise, to be fair. If you even know anything about us, it's probably because of comics in some way or form. This is what we were the original gurus in,
especially for modern stuff.
For modern stuff, we're definitely I say you probably listen to the podcast for a lot of film stuff, but most of the time you're probably listening for some comics too. Maybe some video games, but comics is a big part of our demographic and who we're talking to and who we like talking about. And today we're going to tell you kind of how we get into it, what you got to do.
Yeah, things to keep in mind, like where to jump on,
and most
recommendations.
Importantly is the recommendations. Yeah. So we'll go through some best practices to use some of my corporate lingo there. You like that? Best practices on how to get into comics and what you should do when you're getting comics. Yeah. To our actual recommendations. We're going to point out things that will help anybody get into comics. These are books, arcs, crossovers that will help you get deeper. Mm-hmm. And maybe you've read most of these. Maybe if you're a big comic book guy, you've read most of these. But there's something on this list you have not read yet, and it's a classic, and you're missing out. This is an episode for beginners to experts.
Yes, this is in the same way that the anime one was.
Exactly. This is not only for beginners, so experts. If you're super into comics, you're not going to be like, oh shit, this is not for me. But basically, Deshaun, start it off. How do you want to get into it?
We could talk about how we both got into comics. It could start off with maybe the first stuff we started reading as kids, or when we really went deep back in 2011.
Yeah. So I mean, as a kid, I was always a Batman fan. Mm-hmm. Always. There's tons of pictures of me in Batman pajamas. I watched the Batman cartoon. It was always superheroes for me. There was never, Batman and Robin was me and my brother's second costume. It was Piglet and Pooh, our first Halloween. The second one was Batman and Robin.
I did have a Batman and Robin costume with my brother, and it was Schumacher Batman and Robin, so there were nipple suits.
Right? And you're like, oh shit. Yeah, we were pretty good. I didn't read a lot of comics, but I did own them. It was kind of whenever I was given them, whenever I would somehow have money to buy them, I would own them. But most of my encyclopedic knowledge of comics comes from two things: the Batman Encyclopedia and Spider-Man Encyclopedia.
Oh, the DeFalco ones.
Yes.
Yeah, especially for Spider-Man.
I used to have that one for Spider-Man one.
I read the shit out of the X-Men one.
Oh, that one's good too.
Yeah.
They gave me such a large basis of knowledge in books I had never read. It was so funny because I could pick up any comic in any era of comic books after that, and be able to know where it was from, who was in it. It helped a ton to get me.
They
into
still
comics.
make those too.
Yeah, they're great.
I remember when I was working at a Barnes and Noble years ago, back when I still lived in the Boston area the first time. And I was told to man the desk, which wasn't normally my job, but there was literally no one around. And it was raining, so no one even showed up anyway. I didn't have to ring up a single customer. So what I did was I yoinked and just brought it to the counter and ended up just reading it through the entirety of my shift. Best shift ever.
Best shift ever.
It was a Superman one.
No, that's nice. See, the thing is, those books are great for kids because full of great pictures. But then all of a sudden there's these little snippets and it's base knowledge, I wouldn't have probably never known about the Prowler, but I knew the Prowler, going in because I had already read that.
Batman was, sort of similar for me. That was my guy. My introduction was the first Tim Burton movie, then the animated series. And then instead of...
it was toys and the animated series for me. And then the Schumacher movies. And then 89.
Yeah, Batman Forever.
89, my mom always referred to 89 and Batman Returns as like the dirty Batman movies.
The dirty Batman.
Because they were they were dark.
Batman Returns
and sexual. Like
Batman Returns is pretty dirty.
Like,
89 is fine, but Returns gets pretty weird.
Pretty weird. That's all my mom was ever saying. It gets really like
actual
sexual.
Quote from the Penguin in Batman Returns: "Just the pussy I've been looking for."
No, right?
Which is the first thing he says. The first thing he says to Catwoman.
What?
The movie's wild.
It's a crazy movie.
But yeah, so it was a combination of that. Not much in the way of single issues for the most part, aside from like what my mom occasionally might get for me. It was mostly toys. The first comics I would actually ever end up reading for Batman in particular would be from my library. Yeah. I'm pretty sure the first Batman comic I ever read was Death in the Family.
Nice. So the first comics I ever owned were, I think we talked about it on the Sonic episode, were Sonic the Hedgehog and Bionicle comics. Now, did you own Bionicle comics?
Not comics, but I did have a shitload of the actual toys.
But the Bionicle comics,
I always bought the video games.
Oh, but the Bionicle comics, bro. First off, they had great artists on them, like guys who went on to do Marvel and DC stuff. It's great. I can't remember any of them at the moment, but great artists. And the story, like that's what brought you into Bionicle there was an actual good story here, and like it was fun and
surprisingly deep lore.
And those were the first comics I ever owned. Other than I would get random. The first one I remember owning, which is super weird, was from 1960s. It was a Justice Society, and it had Liberty Bell, like
really? Wow.
like with yellow pants and the blue top, like so. It was actually like a really fun story. It was like and I remember loving that book so much because it was characters I had never seen before. Even though I had read the Batman Encyclopedia and the Spider-Man Encyclopedia, Justice Society was full of ones I had never seen before. And I was like, who the fuck are these guys? And I remember loving that.
Yeah, aside from that, it would just be like... I imagine probably stuff that my mom got for me when we used to live in Northampton.
Yeah.
And there was a Newberry Comics. There's a Newberry Comics down there. So I imagine whenever she went like downtown or something, she'd be like, "Oh, stop by and get something for him." And one comic in particular I wish I still had, because I wonder how much it's even worth now, is I had the 9/11 Spider-Man issue.
Yeah, that's worth a lot of money now.
With the black cover.
Yeah, that's
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that being like a real heavy comic.
Uh-huh.
Especially since I was a kid reading it.
Yeah, you're like, what the
fuck? But, yeah, I wonder how much that's worth now.
Yeah, right?
Because that's long gone.
That's long gone. I actually still, as I just moved, I still have a lot of these comics. I don't have many Bionicles, but I have like 3 or 4 still somewhere. And I do still have the Justice Society story, which is like, I preserved it real nice. Like I tried to keep it safe because I knew it was like the first comic I ever owned. Like I was like, this is important to me. Like I was like, keep this safe. Yeah. But when we really got into comics is when you probably first heard about us. If you listened to Real Books Don't Have Batman.
Back in the Dizzy.
Was back. Me and Deshaun I think me and you were really into trade paperbacks at that point. We were reading comic books and stuff like that. But then when we met, we kind of... I don't know. It was like was a combo of that we loved comics.
We loved stuff like that, and we would just go. We had like so much free time between like classes and stuff like that, and we would just go into like a Newberry Comics just to hang out and maybe see something that we would like.
Exactly.
And this was the perfect. This is basically what the New 52 was for.
Yeah, is like people browsing,
and there are a bunch of new number ones. It's a reboot, so it's completely easy to just jump right in.
Yep, and
I think it might have started with like you and I being like, I bought like issue 1 of Snyder's
Court
Batman,
of Owls,
Court of Owls, and I'm like, you gotta read this shit.
I know, I remember that.
And then I started to like slowly catch up because it was like maybe like 7 issues in at that point, and I had to like scramble. I had to go to like different Newberry Comics just to get the others, and I did. And they were just like, all right. And then we started reading it more and more. And then when you started buying comics, you started buying Justice League, I think.
Yeah.
And that just kept going.
And
then we just kept expanding like what we would get every week. And then we were just like, why don't we talk about this?
Yep. And that's how the podcast got started. I bet it's a combo of us going into the Newberry Comics, and then Newberry Comics used to have this deal where if you got if you got boxed comics. So if you got comics sent to a box that's set aside for you, set aside for your name, and you basically subscribe to these comics, and you show up and buy them. They don't make you subscribe, but they like buy enough copies for you.
So that once Wednesday rolls around, once a shipment has come in, you can just go in and just like, oh, I want to grab the stuff from my box, and you're just like, all right, here's all the issues you have.
And that's a great way to get into comics, and it's how we did, is that we kind of went through and picked the ones we liked in the New 52 roundup. You know, like we were like, because we were standing there in the Newberry Comics, we'd flip through a couple ones and be like, fuck, not that one, not Red Hood and the Outlaws, you know, like, you know, like not this one, but we'd find the ones we'd liked, and then we kind of did like 10 of them at the time, and then once the podcast started, it was like...
It got ridiculous.
We were doing over 20 comics a week. And
it was even like not only just stuff that we would buy ourselves, but even stuff that I would just read in the store, or you and I would just read in the store before we went.
Funny.
We had so much free time.
So much free time.
It was great.
So much free time. That's what you don't realize about college, is how much free fucking time you had.
Yeah.
And use it wisely. You knew people going into college shoes here. And by that, I mean... Start a comic book podcast.
When people reminisce about high school, I can never necessarily relate because I wasn't really a big fan of high school.
Yeah, I get it.
I didn't have a terrible time of high school, but I was ready to get the hell out.
Yeah, I understand.
But like college, that I remember fondly.
Yeah, exactly. We had a good time.
Yeah.
And basically, you know, we would get up every day and we would go, do whatever classes we had to do, and then go to the store, grab our comics, read some stuff in store when we were there, because we were good friends with everybody at Newberry. They all knew us. We were in there every Wednesday, you know, like, and then we would get our comics and read them as we came back to our recording space, and either read the rest of them while we were in the recording space and then record.
Yeah,
you know,
just
like,
talk about it.
Which, I mean, that is how you keep a fucking show current, is you have fucking read it.
We used to get so many compliments about like how fast we were. Just like, you guys are so fast. Just like, because we literally pick up our stuff on Wednesday, we read it, and then when we talk about it.
We talk about it. Which I do miss that. I do miss that a lot.
I do miss being like so like finger on the pulse about stuff right now, because I've kind of fallen out. I still read a bunch of stuff, but I pick and choose, and I'm mostly back on like the trade paperback game.
Exactly. So let's talk about that here, though. Let's start getting into
the formats,
the actual formats. So when you're buying comics, there's the weekly comics. You get them single issue,
weekly,
weekly, monthly. Whatever it comes down to.
Single issue usually ranges from about like 20 to 30 pages,
23
depending.
to 30 pages, usually. And because it's like 22 and an ad. Or 21
and a bunch of ads.
2 ads. Like, that's DC Comics when it was being nice. Now it's not so. At Marvel and DC, not so.
It's like an
nice
ad every
ads.
2 pages.
But you can either get the single issues and be on the very pulse as it comes out, which is really cool, because that's the way this was meant to be taken in. You know, like on the weekly, new adventure you're coming to, you know, like that might not be the same Batman story, but it's another Batman story.
And the benefit is that they're so cheap.
Yeah.
Like you're getting like a 22 to 23 page story for like a couple bucks.
Like $3.99.
It became like a running joke where I'd be like, I wouldn't even buy like fast food. Just like I could get like a McChicken. Just like, $2-3, that's comic money.
Yeah, it's comic
That's
money.
like 2 comics
That's
right
2
there.
comics right there. Yeah, we used to get weird about that. We'd be like, that's 2 comics. I don't know if I can afford that. But like, it's true. But it's so much fun that way, you know, like, because it's like the serials of old. You are literally getting it as it's coming out weekly. It's so nice.
And there is something to value in the way you consume entertainment like that.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world where like everything is like binge as far as like TV is concerned.
Yep.
It actually felt refreshing, and I didn't think I was going to like it. The fact that The Mandalorian was released weekly.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I remember hearing that. I'm like, bullshit. I love a good binge. But actually watching it weekly, I'm like, I know this.
Because it's nice to talk to people about
the novelty, just like the interim. You know what I mean?
It's nice to like... first off, maybe watch it again and talk about it. Let it ruminate before you move on to the next thing instead of I consumed all of the Mandalorian.
And with comics, that's a big thing because you're usually getting issues of a particular one monthly or bi-monthly.
Yeah, and that's a big deal because first off, this is what makes comics an interesting art form. Also, is that they have to bring in new readers because it's coming in weekly.
Yeah.
But you are also wanting to keep your readers there for the long haul, so you don't want to recap too much, but you also want to be like, hey, welcome to fucking Bat Family,
Yeah, but that was the benefit
Spider-Man.
of the New 52, was that you can complain about like the DC Universe reboot all you want. One, DC's kind of known for it. They always hit the reset button like every 10 years.
Yep.
But it's also just
Marvel
a case
too.
of like,
I mean, not really.
we got to get new readers in, and it was the perfect time for us because there's literally a bunch of number ones.
Yeah, we were like, wow.
Pick one.
Yeah, I do own almost every number one of the New 52. We were right there buying it, and I'm pretty proud of that. Like, I know it'll be worth nothing at some point. But
as far as single issues are concerned, I do own all of I finally own all of Snyder and Capullo's Batman run.
Nice.
I think the only thing I'm missing is an annual. I think I'm missing the third annual. But as far as main series is concerned, all of it in my filing cabinet at home.
Nice. So the other way to buy comics basically is trade paperbacks or the graphic novel.
Or it varies. The thing, TPB and graphic novel tends to be used synonymously.
Yeah, they seem to be swapped.
Yeah, it's debatable.
Because graphic novel usually implies a completed work.
Yes.
It usually implies that. That
a Watchmen or a V for Vendetta, something like that.
An author and an artist working together to create a singular thing, not a whole process of maybe several writers, several people. That's what you might get with a trade paperback.
A trade paperback, I guess it's sort of like the square and rectangle argument.
Yeah.
A trade paperback is a collection of issues. It varies. Sometimes it's 4. Sometimes it's 4 to 7, maybe 8 to 9. It varies depending on the company and the run and such like that. And that tends to be a way for you to wait for a bit, and then you have more story to take in at once. Depending on the company, they do take a while. DC takes forever to put out their trades because they're really big about releasing the hardcover first. So that tends to wait a while. Marvel's fucking rapid fire about
put them
it.
Out as soon as it's done.
It's as soon as you have a few issues, you're 2 weeks later they have a trade out.
It's kind of amazing in a way. You're holy shit. But so it's a hard thing here. We could probably do a whole episode on why we transitioned from single issues to trade paperbacks. But it became, first off, that we moved away, so we weren't getting, we weren't doing the same thing we were doing before. So, and we kind of backed away from the pulse thing of being exactly on the pulse of comics, which is not a bad thing. I think at some point, sometimes you have to. And
I think in a fanboy's lifetime, it tends to fluctuate. It
fluctuates. And there's different things.
The guys over at Anti Fanboy, they had sort of had that phase before the New 52 rolled around, where they were starting to fall out, and then we had ours.
Yep,
and now we're pretty much both in the same spot. We're just we'll read occasionally. We stick to the indie books we like, stuff like that, where it's easier to catch up to. In-universe stuff, there's always a lot of baggage.
There's always a lot you didn't read about before. And which is the reason why the single issues is a great thing, is you are there. You know the universe. You can you've been there the whole time.
Yeah.
Instead of trade paperback where you're so I get 3 issues of my story, and then there's some event crossover here that doesn't exactly tie into the rest of my books here. Okay. You all of a sudden you get an event comic in the middle of your 3-issue arc, and you're like, what? And then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. That happens all the time in trade paperbacks. You're just like, oh, yeah, of course. You got to have your every 4 months event thing.
Yeah.
But basically,
So TPBs, standalone graphic novels, sometimes they can be used interchangeably, but standalone specifically implies something different. Usually tends to be longer. And then bigger than that, it's more just amount of how much.
Yes.
Omnibuses tend to just have much more issues, sometimes 20 to 30 depending.
Sometimes 50.
And then you have stuff like the compendiums for The Walking Dead, where they're just huge phone books.
Honking things. Which I love. those.
Yeah,
things.
omnibuses are nice.
They're nice.
The only ones I have, and then they're recent purchases, are Gail Simone's run on Wonder Woman and Grant Morrison's new X-Men.
See,
I really wanted to get the Azzarello one, but I already bought all the trade paperbacks for them, so I'm like, shit. Would be nice to have in just one nice big ass
Yeah, that'd
book.
be so nice. See, I don't even think I have any omnibuses. Like, other than I have it's funny, it's like a 1950s Batman omnibus for some reason. Somebody bought it for me.
I have like a black and white like compilation that's like Batman's Brave and the Bold team up issues specifically. Cool. I got that for Christmas years ago.
Does that have Bucky taking the fucking drugs, or does it
Speedy.
So
no,
not
I don't
Bucky.
think
so. No, it doesn't have.
No, because that's not.
That's
Batman.
a great cover. First off,
yeah, but that's not Batman. That's Green Lantern, Green Arrow.
Oh damn it!
Yeah.
I missed up the fucking combo.
But I'm not really huge into omnibuses generally, just because it's a lot.
Huge.
It's expensive. Yeah.
It's expensive.
With the Gail Simone thing, I had to have it because that run of Wonder Woman of hers has been out of print for years.
Yeah.
So I had to just like swipe it up.
So I'm really into trade paperbacks now. You know, like it's nice to just get a book, read it, and finish it.
And then even beyond, you want to talk about formatting while we're still on the topic, there's digital.
Yes. And so digital comics, not bad. Mm-hmm. It's how I read all of Green Lantern. I read it on a computer, but I wasn't reading, the modern, like, you click a button, it moves to the next panel.
You have, like, the guided view that Comixology does, which is the shit, by the way.
No, see, I don't like that. I think there's an important art to comics when you look at the entirety of the page by itself.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about holding a comic in your fucking hand.
Well, they're pretty good about knowing where to pan and where to cut in. If it's a splash page, obviously you pull out, etc. They're pretty good about like keeping the nuance of like keeping the reveals intact, and they've gotten better. Because that's how I'm reading Immortal Hulk, and they're a little more accurate than they used to be.
Yeah, they used to be. Yeah. So I really don't mind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more about something about the spoilers being right in front of your eyes is an important part about comics. Yeah. Like it's the only medium where it kind of ruins itself when you look at it sometimes. There's something, so you have to be like focused.
There's something about like the medium itself and the advantages and disadvantages of it, of how you have to play to your pacing and your audience. Yep. Like, never underestimate like the page turn. The page turn is such an important thing for a comic, especially if you want like a huge reveal. You wait for a big page turner.
Comics will never die.
Yeah, you flip it and you get like a huge splash page or something, and you're like,
there's nothing that gives me a fucking boner like opening up a great splash page, man. There is nothing in this goddamn world. You ever had sex before? Not as good as fucking open up a great splash page. No, I'm just kidding.
A big reveal.
But I'm telling you, like, sometimes you turn the page and you're like, fuck, like, that's crazy. And all these comics you're about to recommend to you are full of this shit.
Yeah.
You're full of this shit.
But it's all about, like, accessibility.
Yeah.
And I get it. If you don't have the space to either buy single issues or even don't have the shelf space to buy, like, trade paperbacks and stuff like that, and you want to conserve on it, digital comics is not a bad option.
It's a very good for the environment.
Yeah.
I understand. Basically, what we're saying is there is no wrong way to read comics.
Yeah.
If somebody tells you there is, they're fucking wrong. Mm-hmm. We talk about it often on the show. We don't like gatekeeping. And comics is all about anti-gatekeeping. Anybody can like comics. You should be able to read comics any way you want to.
In the same philosophy that we had throughout our How to Get Into Anime episode, in the same way that there's an anime out there for everyone, even if you...
There's absolutely
a comic for everyone.
Like, no question. Like, anime, I feel like sometimes you gotta get, like, pick and weave.
Yeah.
But, like, comics... It's just literature, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if we have to say this.
It's sequential art.
It's sequential art.
Sequential.
Cinnamon art. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But basically, like this... when I hear the art... Our old podcast was called Real Books Don't Have Batman because people all the time would be like... Why don't you guys just
read real books?
Read real books. You guys just read comics all the time because even at school we'd be reading fucking comics constantly.
I remember like I forget what our like lighting teacher was called back in college. He was super nice about it because everyone knew I was a huge comic geek in the class. I was like the only one in the class. He was like, "Oh, you like comics?" I'm like, "Yeah." big fan. He's just like, hey man, he's like, comics are the best storybirds.
Yes, they're basically
like,
storyboards. Like,
thank you. That's just show some damn respect.
Show some damn respect. And basically, it was a big joke because we do believe that these are real books. Yeah. Like, this is real fucking art. Mm-hmm. This is not just kid shit.
And just like any other medium, there are advantages and stuff that you can only do with it in the same way that you could do with actual prose literature, or you could do with movies and TV.
Or animation. Yeah. You know, like, that's what's great about comics, is that it's got the fun of literature and reading a book, but the stretch and imagination of an animated movie or show. Because anything can happen in a comic. Anything can happen in a comic, and you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, that's also another thing. Like, you guys go to see every single Marvel movie, and it's a huge hit. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that. Yeah. But with a comic, there are no limitations.
No.
Stuff like Infinity War and Endgame, that's like another Tuesday for a Marvel comic.
Exactly. And that's what's so funny is that, people are always like, well, what are they going to do next? And you're like, they literally have over 80 years of comic history. They can find something to do next, like they always ask, like, "Oh, well, what?" Then again,
I've been hearing that since like Avengers 1 came out.
Like,
where do they go from here?
Where do they go from here? You're like, what do you mean? Where do they go from here? They just started. Like, like, this is nothing. That was the first crossover. Like, you're like, this is nothing. You got to kill people, bring them back. That's when I know we've reached comic level.
Yeah,
like, was when we started killing people on one movie and bringing them back the next without consequences. And that's when I know we've hit real comic book level. So. Basically, we respect comics. Is basically how we take it. Is as much as we called our show "Real Books Don't Have Batman." Mm-hmm. These are real books. You should take this art seriously. This is an art form. There's a reason why we want to own this shit and like hold it in our hands, because it's art right in front of your face. It's better than a museum sometimes because you fucking got new art right in front of your face, created. I'm not saying it's better than a museum. I love a museum. But I'm just saying that it's really cool.
I bet you're really missing museums now.
Oh, yeah, seriously. No, I mean, you could go on appointments to a lot of museums. I did an appointment to the Stoneham Zoo. That was really nice. Going to a zoo without people around and it being a zoo is nice. You get the animals are just chilling. They're like, "Hey, what's up?" The bear literally was like, "What's up?" when he saw me. I was like, "What the fuck?" He's just chilling. He's just having a good time. But like, it's museums. It really sucks not having them now. But like, the great thing about a comic is that these guys have worked on it for months, years on this comic, and you're literally holding this new art in your hands.
Yeah.
What's better than that? Nothing. Nothing. You hear me? Nothing. So moving on, we got to actually start getting into these recommendations.
Yes.
But basically, summing it up, if you want to get into single comics, find a place that does boxes, because first off will help you keep organized. You'll be like, okay, I subscribe to these 10 comics instead of we were I got 20 comics. Oh,
look,
shit.
It's easier than it ever has been for people.
So easy.
Because not only do you because it's basically just the internet.
Yep.
If you want to know what runs people really like or is an easier one, you could like go to Reddit or something.
Right.
And if you need some context for a particular run, if you're jumping right in the middle of something, nothing wrong with hitting a little wiki just for some context.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier than it's ever been. You don't have to have the encyclopedias like we had as kids.
But what we're going to talk about is like our recommended like starting points for like some of the major characters.
Yes, that's going to be our first bit here. So starting points for major characters, where you can jump in if you're a brand new baby. If you just came out of the womb and you say, "What the comic? What should I read?" This is what we're going to give you.
So it's character-based.
Character-based, this first one. Don't worry, we will go on to different genres at the end. We're just going to start with the superheroes because that's where the money is at comics.
Yeah.
That's where...
we definitely have other stuff to talk about.
We definitely have other stuff to talk about. So first off, let's talk about our main man here.
Batman.
Love Batman. Best character ever. Love him. So there's lots of starting points I could give you here.
Yes, I tried to narrow it down for like 2 to 3 at the most for each one of these characters.
Yeah. So there's lots of places you could jump on. There's lots of places I jumped on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there are lots of weird places I jumped on with Batman. But number one, year one.
Year one.
Why start with anything else? Give the fucking goddamn respect to Batman Year One. Batman the Year One is one of the best graphic novels ever written.
Yep.
Like, it is so good. Like, Dark Knight Returns, fantastic.
Yes.
Like, so good.
Not precisely a good starting
No,
point.
but it's not a good starting point. Yeah, this is, if you want to learn about Batman and how he does Batman and became Batman Year One.
So the interesting thing about Year One is that Batman is, while involved, sort of almost in the background.
Yeah.
The main heart of this story is actually on Jim Gordon first moving to Gotham and being involved with the GCPD.
Oh, man.
And it really follows him as like the main character.
And it's just, it's how you quickly are like, wow, Commissioner Gordon's one of my favorite characters in Batman. You know, like, Year One is a fantastic tale of real life.
Yes.
As much as this is like fantastical because we're dealing with Batman, this is a down and dirty crime family book, and it's also, but it really sticks away from a lot of the mysticism that's going on. You know, like when we're dealing with Batman, he's doing realistic moves.
Yeah, the most abstract it like ever gets is like the iconic like, yes, father, I shall become a bat.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's pretty down and dirty. He's using like practical disguises. The first time he goes out, he gets injured pretty bad. Like it's all trial and error.
And definitely, you've seen this now. If you've watched Batman Begins, you've seen a lot of this.
Yeah, Batman Begins pulls from Year One a lot.
You've seen this in other Batman stories, but you show respect. This was the first one to like get the whole cohesive Batman story really together and tell you an actual tale of early Batman.
Yes.
Because, sure, we've had tons of origin Batman stories. Over the years, it literally happened in the first page of every comic of Batman. It's how they used to start comics. They just give you the origin story. They're like, here they fucking go. But this was, like, truly Batman starting and then getting out there and doing it, you know, like, and I think that's why this is such a great starting point for Year One.
But alternatively, you have the Court of Owls, which we had brought up briefly as like when we jumped into the New 52 when that first started.
So there's a reason why this sparked our deep, endless love of comics after this. This is an amazing comic.
Yes.
First off, learn who Scott Snyder is and read everything he has. He's going to show up a lot on this list. He's going to show a lot on this list because he's one of the best comic book writers alive. No question.
So to summate, without getting too deep into it, the thing about the New 52 as far as Batman was concerned, this was also, by extension, a thing with Green Lantern too, is that he was affected by the reboot, but sort of kind of not really.
Yeah, not like a lot of the New 52s, they like really start with a number one.
Yeah.
But this here, it's kind of like...
A lot of it's just like,
most of it happened,
even if it might be augmented in some way, like... Grant Morrison's run up until that point definitely pretty much just happened. But it's good. It's a good jumping on point because the family's already established. They didn't start that all over again. So you get like tastes of like what they're like and you get the gist.
You get the whole Bat family.
Yeah, even if you're unfamiliar with them. And you place what works about the threat of the Court of Owls is that there's something that Batman's never encountered before, but they've been in the shadows and have been more or less running Gotham from behind the scenes from the beginning, even before Bruce was born.
It's Court of Owls is two things. First off, it's a great starting point for any Batman fan to get into those comics. And two, it's the first original Batman villain in fucking years, and they nail it.
Or one that sticks.
Yes, the one that sticks. Because there's a lot of new villains, you know, like they throw them all the time. But
But it's always like throwing shit at the wall and see what sticks. The Court of Owls have definitely stuck around.
And
they've had iterations in animated movies. They're in the Gotham Knights video game coming up, and I'm excited.
Yeah, exactly. This is such a breath of fresh air, and also a fire starter.
It's so,
like it's a kindling.
It helps that like the aesthetic and like their motivation and their design and stuff. It's so
we talked up Greg Capullo. I mean, we talk up Scott Snyder, but you got to put respect on Greg Capullo's name, because first off, you know him from Spawn, or you don't know him from Spawn, because this is supposed to be getting into comics. But like, you know the man, like you've seen his art before.
Yes.
If you know anything about comics, you've probably seen his art before, and to see it was already a treat just to have him doing Batman.
Yes.
And then to have him on Batman for so long is so amazing. It's fantastic. And he is Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo is the dream team.
It's definitely one to jump in, because it pretty much gives you all you want. You have the detective aspect. You have a new threat newly established into it. You see how the family is involved, and you see and you also get super psychological.
Yeah.
So you pretty much get everything you'd want out of a Batman story distilled into one place.
Oh man. And I still remember the labyrinth scene when you turn the comic sideways to read it.
That definitely doesn't work digitally.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And that's in that moment alone is such an argument for physical comics. You know, like is such that and so many other stories by like Jeff Lemire and stuff like that, who played with formatting. You know, like every great writer / artist plays with formatting.
Anytime I would get people into like Scott Snyder's Batman run, they would always message me later, just be like, "Dude, when the comic turned around in the labyrinth, it was so insane." I'm like, "Yep, that's how they do it."
So we won't spoil it, but that is it's one of those moments that makes you go, wow, comics are truly an art. You know, like it's first off a great moment just looking great. And then also it's so cool playing with literally the physics of your comic. You're like, what the fuck? It's mind blowing.
Yes.
I all about the Court of Owls.
So as far as Batman's concerned, year one, Court of Owls.
Yeah, Court of Owls. Superman. So where do we start with Superman?
Superman was a tough one when I was trying to like map this out, because Superman's had a million different origins, and I was trying to find out which one was the most accessible yet modern and still holds up. I like John Byrne's run of Superman, but it's kind of archaic now.
Yeah.
And I really like Superman's Secret Origins, but that has a lot of continuity baggage, like Legion of Superheroes and Superboy shit and stuff like that.
You're like, cool, okay.
And I like Birthright. Like, Mark Waid's a great writer. It's
Birthright.
never been like a huge Superman story for me. People love Birthright. It's never been one of my favorites. But I felt like a perfect place that sort of summates what Superman is and the appeal to him was For All Seasons by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale.
I mean, so this is another pair you're going to hear several times probably in here. Jeff Loeb and it is just... All Seasons is so good. We didn't bring up Long Halloween during Batman, and that's because Long Halloween is a really great comic, but it's not a great starting point.
No.
It's so good, and it's one of those things that gets people really deep into comics. Long Halloween.
If you wanted to do like a whole topic
point.
about like a reading order, it'd be good to go maybe like year one, Man Who Laughs, Long Halloween.
Yeah,
but this is specifically about starting points. It's not a good one to like jump in right off the bat.
So that's why
year one helps you prepare for all of that, because it like sets up the mob and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all for All Seasons being Superman's choice here because first off, great art.
Yeah,
this is a fantastic looking book, but it's also it kind of like gets deep into Superman. You know?
Tim Sale's art is so specific too, because it's like rough around the edges, but charming in its own respect. Like, we would make jokes all the time about the way Superman is drawn in this book, because he sort of has like an egghead and sort of like a pouty face on the cover. I'm very disappointed.
I'm very disappointed in
you, Lex Luthor. But it's great.
It's so good. This is definitely the comic I point to when people are like, I don't know much about Superman. You know, like, and that's a lot of people.
And another one I would point out would be All-Star Superman, but that's also another one that's not really
an
a good
ending point.
That's
it's kind of like Dark Knight Returns.
It's like, I was about to say, it's like Dark Knight Returns, but for Superman.
It's the subversion of what's going on, so that's why it's so great, but it doesn't work as a starting
It helps.
point.
It's a great Superman story. It's actually my favorite comic, but it's one of those things where like it helps to have some background before you jump into it.
Yeah, I feel that. So moving on to Wonder Woman. This one, there's lots to pick here.
Yeah.
There's lots to pick
I narrowed it down.
And that's the thing is, lots of people are like, Wonder Woman, there's not many good story arcs for her. And you're like, shut the fuck up.
No, Wonder Woman, out of most of like these characters, was the one I felt like when I was doing my research and trying to like solidify what ones to pick. Almost felt like I was spoiled for choice.
Yeah, because we'll just say it right out. Greg Rucka's pre-52 run, fantastic. Gail Simone's run, legendary.
Right afterwards.
Legendary.
Great. The fan favorite tends to be whenever Rucka writes it, which is why when Rebirth rolled around, he was back on the book was a huge deal for people.
And then Brian Azzarello's run on New 52.
Yeah, Azzarello's run is very different, but that's why it works. It's very much in doing its own thing. Doesn't really have much in the way of like other DC characters showing up, except maybe like Orion and stuff like that. But it feels separate to like where the New 52 was as a universe at that point. Feels very standalone, easy to jump in, one and done. Very different take on Wonder Woman.
Very different. But also probably one of my favorite takes on Wonder Woman. It's absolutely fantastic.
If you're thinking more traditional, then Greg Rucka, pre-52, and Gail Simone. I would say George Perez, but it's just so old now that it'd be hard to get like a modern reader into that. That is what the Wonder Woman movie pulls from the most, is the George Perez stuff.
It's true. I love Gail Simone's run on Wonder Woman.
Yeah, I'm slowly rereading it. It's great.
It's so
I've been like,
good.
Every few nights I've been like, because I have the omnibus now, so I've been like going through it slowly. It's good.
And Greg Rucka, I love his writing because he's very much a war writer. You know, like the man writes action super well, but he's got this feel for what. He must have been a soldier or something, because the man gets battle,
that tends to be like the thing that people compare, especially if you want to do like Rucka versus Simone back to back, because they were pretty much one after the other. Is Rucka was really about like the warrior side of Wonder Woman, and Gail Simone really emphasized like the ambassador, the love,
the love, which I love.
The fact that she's like the den mother of the DC universe.
It makes
Wonder
so
Woman's
good.
a tough character to write.
It's tough
because there's that like fine line between like the warrior and the ambassador, and when is it appropriate? What's the right thing?
Yeah, it's like the love and the also snapping his neck. You know, snapping a few necks. I think, Wonder Woman, it seems like it's a hard character to write for, but somehow we have some really fantastic arcs by these writers, and you should absolutely check them out. Now, one of my favorite characters in all the DC universe, the Flash. The Flash. Now, this is another one that there's just two you should ever read.
Yes.
There's lots of Flash history, but there's just two.
But the easiest to jump into
is Jeff Johns' run, and then Francis Manapul's run in the New 52.
Yes. So Jeff Johns' run is significant in that it brought Barry Allen back to life, who I think this was back when death meant something in comics, kids. Barry Allen was dead for like 23 years. Like the longest time, like Wally West was just the Flash. That was who the Flash was for me growing up. It's the same thing with Kyle Rayner being Green Lantern. Like that's who Green Lantern and the Flash were.
That's funny.
And then during the course of like getting back into comics and like keeping up with the history, Jeff Johns brought back both Barry Allen and Hal Jordan, and he sort of brought things back to basics, and that carried up until about the reboot, and then we had the New 52 run with Francis Manapul, and that was great.
That is good.
It was just so vibrant and fun. You know what I mean?
God. It is, when I talk about playing with the panels, because I was talking about formatting earlier, like how you change the format, but when we're playing with panel design here, like actual, like the panels being dynamic and working into each other. Francis Manapul is a fucking
I remember you
masterclass.
bringing it up as an example because we had that the writing for the graphic novel class.
Yeah.
And everyone had to like show off a comic as an example of sequential art and like how the narrative works. And you had brought in New 52 Flash as the example.
Yeah, because they have great they work the onomatopoeia into the panels in certain parts, and there's just so many great moments in that run that will literally make you like hold it out in front of you and be like, holy shit,
yeah,
this is beautiful.
It's such like a definitive version of the Flash in that it hits all the beats that you want. You get Gorilla Grodd, you get Reverse Flash, but the art is so vibrant, and the little tweaks that they do to the narrative to like bring its own spin on it because it was a reboot make it refreshing. Like, I love the New 52 version of Reverse Flash.
Yeah, so there's two reasons why, two things that made me fall in love with Flash and make me that weird Flash fanboy that wants as much Flash as possible but doesn't like the Flash show, is that is this and Flashpoint. The new Francis Manipool killed it on Flash because he was able to like kind of open the universe.
Yeah,
you know,
and
like,
for context, Flashpoint was the event comic that
led into New 52.
Launched the New 52.
We'll be talking about crossovers in a bit, but Flashpoint is not a good starting point. I would never suggest somebody to start. That'd be like
it's a good event though.
It's a good event. It's a great event. But it's like it would be like starting with Avengers vs. X-Men. You'd just be like, huh? What? Who are these people? Like, it would just be like, wait, hold on. But these two really made me fall in love with the characters, especially Barry Allen, because I was never a Wally West fan. I thought he was cool, but he never like made it like Kyle Reiner. I never fell in love with that character.
It was never the thing that made you a fan.
Yes, but Barry brought me right in. It's like it's that lighthearted but still detective, you know, like that really worked for me. You know,
that's something that I don't think runs lean into enough with the Flash is the fact that he's like a forensic scientist,
right? You're just like,
and
what?
You feel like that would open up the doors for not only just like unique storytelling, but the fact that it should make Barry most of the time the smartest person in the room.
Yeah,
and we don't really lean into that with a lot of runs, even with the Flash TV show.
Yeah,
it's like never. It's always like in the background, but it's never part of him. You point it out. You're just like, Barry, you would know this. You're into forensics. Why does this never come up? But the problem with the Flash TV show is just like it's too much of a CW show for its own good.
For its own good. I don't. It's like I did watch that show for a while, but definitely I wouldn't even recommend that to new Flash fans. If somebody was asking me, you know, like, oh, what should I read as? Should I watch the show as a new Flash fan? I would tell you no.
No, it's gonna.
I would say read this stuff first.
It's good. It's pretty solid at first, but then it dropped off. Like I stopped in like the middle of season 4 because it just fell into the same like trappings every single time.
Exactly.
And I was getting sick of it.
It did, you know, like it did open the universe as I wanted it to, but then it like kind of goes too far. You know, there's a time when you open the universe, but then you also have to close it. Yeah. You know, like you have to be like, this is the end of it. You know, like here's the end of the universe. This is where it stops. Instead of just like the show's been, it's just been like, keep going, keep going, keep going. You know, like because it has to, but it's gonna fuck itself over. But moving on, we're gonna keep saying his name multiple times today. Jeff Johns' run on Green Lantern is
That's it. You want to read Green Lantern? That's the one.
That's the one.
That's the one.
That's it. We don't even have to give
it's
any other recommendation.
It's substantial enough. It's definitely long enough.
It's long enough. So one of the when we were talking about getting into comics, one of the things I did to like get into comics was I read all of Jeff Johns' Green Lantern.
And at that point, you weren't a big Green Lantern fan.
No, I was not.
I remember I made fun of you because you didn't know the Green Lantern oath. You're just like, who knows the Green Lantern oath? And then you became a bigger Green Lantern fan than I am.
Huge. I have all the rings. I own all the books in trade paperback, and I got the New 52 run of Green Lantern all in singles.
That's also the benefit of Jeff Johns' run is that you have that transitional period where it was started pre-52, but then transitions into the New 52 because Jeff Johns was chief creative officer.
Yeah, he was like, I don't want to start over.
He's just like, I ain't changing shit.
But it's so damn good because it starts off and you get this feeling of the DC universe before was just weirdly too far, like with Kyle, everybody was all stretched out everywhere, and then somehow Jeff Johns takes the whole Green Lantern universe and brings them all together.
Yeah, at that point, Kyle had been the Green Lantern for a while. We had Guy, we had John Stewart. Hal Jordan had been dead for a long time. He would occasionally come back as something else, like he was the Spectre for a while, and that was kind of cool. But Jeff Johns grew up loving like those original characters like Barry and Hal, so once he got an ounce of power, he's just like, let's bring it back, but let's modernize it. And he did wonders for both characters.
Yeah.
Hal Jordan, pre-Jeff Johns run,
was just an angry old dude.
Yeah, just kind of an angry old dude. But he sort of gave him this Malcolm Reynolds, like, smirky, like, cocksure of himself, like, attitude to him, and that really added a lot to him.
And it's carried over to a lot of things. It's like, like, there's a reason why the Green Lantern movie had Ryan Reynolds. It's because he thought Hal Jordan was really fucking funny. Jeff Johns did. He was like, that's what I'm gonna do. It works in the comics. Nothing about that movie worked except for what's his name as Parallax. Sinestro.
Mark Strong.
Mark Strong is Sinestro. That's good stuff. But that's beside the point. Jeff Johns did a fantastic job on Green Lantern. It's how I got into it. He mostly, as I keep saying, they open the universe. They basically go, hey, we haven't really delved into what the corpse was.
That's the appeal of Green Lantern, is that as far as like the Magnificent Seven, if you want to call it for the main Justice League roster, that's the most sci-fi you're going to get. Superman's an alien, but he tends to be mostly like earthbound.
Yep.
But Green Lantern is literally a space cop.
Space cop. And Jeff Johns leans into that. You learn more about the Corps. You learn that the Corps isn't, the Guardians, who were introduced in the 70s, aren't as pure as everyone thought,
and he was also the one who wanted to, like, complete the color spectrum and sort of introduce that.
Oh, that's the best part. Oh, shit. All right, so you're like, cool, Green Lantern, powered by will, that's awesome. And then they're like, yeah, but what if there's a red ring?
And then you had, like, Sinestro already, which is, like,
Sinestro,
powered by fear.
Yeah, like, cool, we are at that. And then they're like, what about a red ring then? And then it just, after red ring, it just, like, explodes
just
outward.
Like, Star Sapphire is love. He's like, red is rage. Blue is hope.
Yep, and it's just, it's so good. I love this run. I will bring it up later, but he basically ends his New 52 run on it with Blackest Night and Brightest Day.
Yeah.
Which is a giant crossover comic, which we'll talk about later. But it's just, and it feels like it's always been there, like with the Blackest Night, like he's been building to it, and that's what feels so great about this comic is it feels more played out than normal, like a lot of comics, they feel like editors step in and fuck shit up.
And the
this
benefit
is very planned out.
Is that, and sometimes long going runs tend to have this, is that there's sort of a flash forward at the end of Jeff Johns' run that sort of like closes the book on his version of the story, and that you could just read that and you'd be like,
I read all of Green
Lantern.
It's true. And that's how I felt about it at the time. I was like, wow, I read all of Green Lantern. Fuck, I know everything. But I highly recommend it. The next one is a hard choice, Aquaman. So Aquaman, there's not many good arcs of Aquaman, guys.
No.
Big surprise.
Aquaman like really works great as a side character, especially once we started to like toughen him up.
Yeah.
Like in like the
Make
90s to early
strong.
2000s.
Yeah.
Once it's basically when he grew a beard, had the hook for a hand, you're like,
oh, yeah.
But the run, as far as that is concerned, he worked great as as like a member of the Justice League. But as far as solo runs, not really much. But then Jeff Johns working his magic, because boy does he love to take like characters that are like starting to fall by the wayside and be like,
revitalize them.
Yep, time to breathe new life.
So this is New 52 Aquaman. So good.
Yes.
This is what you think about when you're like, hey, stop making fun of Aquaman. And if you like the Aquaman movie, they basically summed up most of the New 52 Jeff Johns run in that one movie. They didn't do any of the crossover stuff or anything like that, but they did do most of his first couple issues of his run. So you get a good taste of what that run is by watching the Aquaman movie. But I still recommend reading those comics because it's better than the movie. I thought that movie was good. Jeff Johns' Aquaman run is so damn good.
Yeah, and that movie pulls mostly from it alone.
Yeah, and this is it's just one of those things where the whole comic has this attitude of like, of what the fuck you say about Aquaman?
Yeah,
like
the whole comic like is aware of like Aquaman's like sort of meta like infamy. Like
yeah,
the
like
jokes.
oh, what
It's
do you
like,
talk
oh,
to
he's
fish?
Useless. He talks to fish. What the hell can he do? And it just like really shows you what the fuck Aquaman can do.
Yeah, and I always say this run for like, what does Aquaman do? And I'm like, read this.
Here,
this fucking
the
thing.
movies definitely helped.
Yeah, the movies definitely help. Not many people say anymore because you have Jason Momoa playing Aquaman. Not what does Aquaman do? You know,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
But before that, there was lots of like, what does Aquaman do? You know, like, and I always pointed to this run. It leads into some of my favorite crossover stuff. Throne of Atlantis is awesome, and they get part of it in the movie. They get part of Throne of Atlantis in there, but they don't get the whole thing. And I totally recommend watching the animated movie if you want like a quick sum up of that.
Yeah,
like,
definitely. So moving on to Marvel.
Yeah. Marvel. So we're moving on to everybody's favorite Avengers. We're going to go down pretty much the Avengers down.
Yeah,
Just give you some recommendations.
Because you could go on and on, especially given how like expanded the MCU has gone
Yeah.
in terms of popularity and stuff like that. But I decided like keep it to the original like main roster for the first movie.
Yeah, I would say. So starting off, Iron Man.
Yeah.
This it wasn't a hard pick. This was Matt Fraction's run
Yes.
on Iron Man is such an easy pick.
Mm-hmm.
First off, Matt Fraction, fantastic. He's going to show up again with Hawkeye because first off, that I know I'm skipping around, but his Hawkeye run makes Hawkeye. Like Hawkeye was just the dude with the arrow in Avengers, and sometimes an asshole, and then you have this. And he just takes it and runs with Hawkeye. It makes it completely different and really blows it up. And it's what you're going to see in the Hawkeye TV show.
Yeah, that's
like,
pretty
no
much what
question.
they're pulling from. They're even using like the same logo as that particular run.
Yeah, no question in my mind is that going to just be a direct translation of that with Jeremy Renner. You know, but Matt Fraction on Iron Man. What's your favorite parts of that?
I really like how this run sort of reinterpreted the Mandarin.
Yeah.
Because the issue with the Mandarin is that he's a stereotype.
Yeah.
That was the issue. That was like why they were sort of timid about the way they adapted them in the MCU. But what they did was, one, they made him young, and they just made him like another business mogul. So like he's this huge, like rich guy in a suit and everything, just long hair and a beard.
Yep.
Except he just happens to have magic rings. So he's like, yeah, that's literally all you have to do.
Yep, and the rings are changed up slightly, so it's not just magic rings.
Yeah.
It's like sort of like software.
It was like, it started off as like magic rings, and then it's revealed to be more like alien technology.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the fun.
Yeah.
He sort of ticks all the boxes with his particular run. It's a very long run of Iron Man. When people say Invincible Iron Man as like the adjective, they think of Matt Fraction's run. It was like post-Extremis, so Iron Man started to have the more like modern suit.
I would also recommend Extremis for people who want to start off.
That's a good book.
That's a great book, but it's also so simple that it's a great way to get into like what Tony does on a mission. You know, like I would say, first off, Extremis has great art. There's also there's a motion comic movie of it that's actually pretty good.
The art of Extremis was so good that they hired him to be the concept artist for Iron Man.
That's
and
dope.
you can tell, you look at the suit in Extremis and you can see almost the one-to-one to what they ended up with in the first Iron Man
right?
film.
It's crazy.
Because before that, it tended to be more like a metal breastplate and spandex.
Exactly.
But then they went full like robotic suit.
I love Extremis for the art almost alone, but because it handles this great story of like, usually a great story in comics is like an antithesis to a hero, you know, like, and this is a great antithesis to Iron Man, something that basically he propelled into motion, you know, like it's like he basically like started this arms race to get to this extremist stuff, and then they're like directly attacking him with it, you know, like it works on a lot of levels. I like that a lot, but Matt Fraction's run on Iron Man is fantastic. Yeah. I definitely am not downplaying it at all. I just say extremists. There's a reason why they adapted it for Iron Man 3, basically. You know,
yeah, extremists definitely gets pulled for Iron Man 3, but it's it's very different.
You can tell we don't like Iron Man 3.
Iron Man 3 is not good.
In this house, we don't respect Iron Man 3.
And the way Extremis was actually adapted was kind of lame. Extremis was this cool sort of
it was just kind of like thrown to the side.
It was almost like this super...
You could have made a whole movie.
Yeah, it was almost like this super soldier serum, but sort of like inky and black and sort of gross, and you could become addicted to it and lose your mind, stuff like that. They turned it into like this fiery thing in Iron Man 3, turn people into human bombs. Dude. Yeah, it's stupid.
It's dumb. But moving on, we have the Hulk. So you're going to have to talk more about Peter David's run on this. But I love Greg Pak's run on Hulk. Like, holy shit. That is definitely one of the things that, before 2011 and getting into deep comics, one of the things that got me into comics was reading trade paperbacks and stuff like that was his World War Hulk event and Civil War. Those two events really brought me into reading the comics in trade paperback form. But World War Hulk is amazing, and then he had such a great run before even World War Hulk that it's totally worth looking into and reading. I absolutely love it. Now, you were saying Peter David's run, though.
Yeah, Peter David's run is fun because that's when Grey Hulk started to be put to the forefront.
Right.
Like, I'm pretty sure Peter David's run is what introduced, like, Joe Fixit.
Yes. And I think that Hulk is a hard character to write.
Yeah, and this was the one...
This was the reason why we don't have a Hulk movie.
Yeah, Peter David's one was the real one to be like, let's just have fun. Let's make Hulk intelligent, and let's just do ridiculous stuff, which tended to be carried over into other runs.
Exactly.
One of my favorite things, not to go on a tangent about how good Immortal Hulk is so far, is that they openly address the many different versions of Hulk we've gotten over the years because of differing runs, and they summate it as Bruce just having severe dissociative identity disorder. And it's super well done.
I'm excited to read that. But I love Greg Pak's run because, first off, he really gives a serious power boost to Hulk. Like, he's able to fuck up the entire Marvel universe, you know, like it is, as he should, though. Like, to be fair, like, all the time they play up that Thor is the Superman of the Avengers. You know, when Thor shows up, the fight's over. But the real thing should be that the fight's fucking over once Hulk's let out of that fucking bag.
Yeah, the benefit of Hulk is that despite how restrictive a character you would think Hulk is, which is always making excuses as to why there's not another movie, it's actually more open than you would think. You can have many different flavors of Hulk. If you prefer the, like, Savage Hulk, as they call it in the comics, where it's just like Hulk smash, doesn't talk much, just brute force.
Yep.
You can read that. If you want a more intelligent Hulk or Professor Hulk type thing, you can read, like, Mark Waid's run.
If you want, like, a horror thing where it's like, I don't know what the Hulk is doing, you know, like, there's always that, you know, like, there's, Hulk is a many layered character, and it's kind of sad that we don't have another movie.
Yeah, it's so dumb. It's mostly, I think, just Disney being greedy because people argue that it's Universal who still owns the film rights to the solo Hulk films.
Yeah,
they don't really have that. What they have is the right of first refusal.
Yeah, which they will. You know,
so so what? If you guys can play nice with Sony, you can play nice with Universal.
Yeah, and they just don't want to because of many reasons, you know, like many reasons, like half of the Universal part being Marvel.
What we got as sort of like a map for the character is Kevin Feige went up to Mark Ruffalo and he's like, oh, what do you want to do with Hulk? He's just like, well, what if we did where I want to go if I were to get to these movies and just do it in his appearances? Yeah. That's why we've had like the slow burn of like Hulk being more and more and more intelligent. So by the time we get to Endgame, we basically have Professor Hulk.
Professor Hulk, yeah, exactly. So moving on to Captain America. There's
only one run of Captain America you need to read.
There's only one. I think that there's a lot of great history in Captain America, same as Batman.
Yeah,
there's lots of great 50s and 60s.
And there's some
Captain
really
America.
solid like standalone stuff too.
But if we're talking about like what's the best Captain America run, it's Ed Brubaker's run on Captain America.
Right off the bat, this is the run that introduces the Winter Soldier.
Yep. And it's
which is like Red Hood but better.
And it even runs beyond Captain America's death, which is why this run is so epic. Is that you go from being like introducing this great character, Winter Soldier, to literally killing him during an event, you know, like which was unheard of at the time, but of course he's back.
Yeah,
you know, like,
death is a revolving door in comics now.
A revolving door. But it was a big deal at the time. I remember it happening during Civil War.
Yeah,
and I remember there for it.
It was like right.
I bought the comic.
It was like right after Civil War. I think it was like after the dust had settled, and you were just like, "We're safe."
We're safe, and then they killed Captain America.
It's kind of like what Grant Morrison did with Damien, just like
right.
death for the family. Okay, it's over. No, Grant Morrison, what are you doing?
Wait, what's that? Yeah, exactly. This run is epic, and it's so well written, and introduces so many great characters to the Captain
these
America
were
universe.
this run is the basis for Winter Soldier the film, and to a degree Civil War the film. It's the Captain America in modern day. Just like, what does a man like Captain America do with like modern politics and modern consequences and problems?
And that's the thing.
How does he approach it?
The Marvel movies do a good job of trying to be nuanced, but Ed Brubaker is extremely nuanced with this. He handles real American issues through the lens of Captain America and does such a great job.
I've read a good chunk. I actually need to jump back into it of his run on Daredevil.
Yeah,
good
stuff.
It's good stuff. And like Bendis' run on Daredevil is fantastic.
He's like Greg Rucka to me, where the man understands warriors in a way, you know, like understands a soldier, and that's the most important part I think he brings to Captain America is that. Sure, he was the soldier before, but during Ed Brubaker's run, it's like he's been through it. You know, like he's seen the battle and he's there, and really the most important part about that run is that he's seen the battle, he can handle the battle, but he doesn't want there to be a battle. You know, like that's like he understands the consequences of war and what it can take away from you and why it's important to be a peacekeeper, and that's what. I think is so masterful about that is that like it's addressing so many things.
And it's a pretty good one-to-one. Like if you really like the Russo brother Captain America films, like you'll really like the run of Captain America from him.
So next up you got Thor, and there's a lot of Thor and there's a lot of what you can do with him.
Thor is a tough one.
Yes.
Because and for me personally as a character, he's not one I've cared about in his own solo outings outside of big event stuff like Ragnarok.
Yeah, of course. You love seeing Thor in a crossover or an event comic, but in his solo stuff, you probably haven't read much. Unless you've read this one.
Yeah, and Jason Aaron's run really started to like delve into the characters. So its first big storyline involves this alien who's going around trying to like kill and dismantle the gods.
Yep.
Out of like vengeance. It's very like almost Thanos-esque in the way they portray him in the MCU before Thanos in the MCU was portrayed in Infinity War. Sort of has that same sort of like nuance and approach to like this is why this is necessary. But it's also a time travel story with 3 different Thors. There's like a young pre-superhero Thor who's like brash and barbaric.
I fucking love.
There's current Thor, who's just like, you know, at the crossroads, and then there's like old, basically Odin Thor, who's way more cynical and has been through a lot more.
It's so good. First off, the art in this is fantastic. It's a beautiful, beautiful comic, and because they're using basically watercolors, and then the thing is that they handle all of this so well, masterfully.
It's the only run of Thor that I could like just really sink my teeth into. It just like, wow, if the movies were half as good as this, we'd be in a much different place.
I always kind of compare this to, we said it earlier, Brian Azzarello's run on Wonder Woman, where this feels different than Thor, but it's still Thor.
Yeah.
You know, like where that was like totally different Wonder Woman, but it still was Wonder Woman. You know, like this isn't completely off of the Marvel universe. They still bring it in, and they introduce. Is this the first Lady Thor?
This is the introduction of Jane Foster's Thor,
yeah, which is now being in the next movie.
Yep.
Which I'm totally for, because if you read this run, you're totally for this. Like, you know, like that's what's so great about this run. They handle Mjolnir as kind of like Excalibur. You know, like like they used to, you know, like because it used to be he walks around with a cane and then, you know, it turns into a fucking hammer and then he's able to, you know, like fly off by swinging it around, you know, like and they hold it with some reverence, and I think that's what's
and it's also a good dynamic for Jane herself, because prior to her becoming Thor, as far as Marvel Universe canon is concerned, she actually had cancer at the time.
Yeah.
And they kept, like, addressing that. There was this beautiful issue where, like, Thor hangs out for her for a day. And they haven't been together for years. But they've been through so much, and they're still so close.
Yeah. It's
and her, like, and him, like, comforting her. So when Thor is deemed unworthy and she takes up the mantle, and they do keep up the mystique for a little bit. Because when they introduce her, you don't know who it is until it's revealed that it's Jane Foster. But it's one of those things where, like, when she's not Thor, she still has the cancer.
Yeah, oh, that's rough.
So it's so well done.
Yeah.
And I also love that
where it's like literally killing her not being Thor.
Yeah.
But you want Thor to be Thor again, you know?
And it's interwoven into the story where Jane Foster's period as Thor is shameful for Thor himself because he's not worthy.
Yeah.
They hint at it from the start because they flash forward to, like, old Odin Thor, where I think it's like his, like, descendants are, like, reading the history books of, like, Thor's adventures and stuff like that, and they go into, like, the restricted section and find one of the books, and he's just like, don't do that. He's just like, no, you can't read this.
You can't read that.
You can't read this. And I think the whole section is called, like, the unworthy. This just period where he wasn't good enough and he's ashamed to think back on it. And it's when Jane Foster is Thor.
That's crazy. I like that. I love that. But it's also, you know, it's an important power dynamic thing, you know, like it's kind of cool. Moving on, I already said it. Hawkeye, Matt Fraction's run. Fucking read it. It will blow your goddamn mind balls. It is just. If you thought year one was down and dirty, this is down and dirty Hawkeye. You know, like this is basically not year one Hawkeye, because he's obviously with the Avengers. He's more trained. He's actually training his own apprentice, sort of. And it's so well done. It's funny. I never liked Hawkeye before this because I'm a Green Arrow guy. I don't like the show, but I'm a Green Arrow comic book guy.
Yeah.
I got one Archer. It's fucking Green Arrow. Like, that's all I got. And I love him. I'm a huge Green Arrow fan. Green Arrow, Green Lantern, so good. But Hawkeye, Matt Fraction finally made me go like, hey, Hawkeye. You know, like, that's pretty fucking cool.
It helped that the book was so grounded. Hawkeye was mostly on his own, and it's him just being sort of a very on-the-street level hero while also struggling to, like, keep his apartment and stuff like that, and him buying a dog. He's sort of away from, like, the bigger machinations of the Marvel universe.
Sci-fi stuff.
And it really works.
Yeah, it really does. It's so well done. I love this. I can't say enough. It's one of those things that it will get anybody into comics, is what I would say. There's lots of books here that will get you into comics. This is one of the ones that I give to people when they are like, I don't know what comic to read, but I like these comics. Yeah. What should I read? I give them Hawkeye, because it does a lot of great things with panel design, formatting, and it's a fun story. This is a great starting point for this character, and it may have not gone better after this or better before this. This is probably peak fucking Hawkeye, and that's it. You know, like, but that's okay. So moving on, Black Widow. Mark Waid's run.
Black Widow was a tough one because she tends not to really have much in the way of, like, solo stuff. She's usually just part of the ensemble. Mark Waid, I'm pretty sure, was actually a run, like, either right before we kind of started reading regularly or just, like, right after. And I've read a little bit of it, and you pretty much know what you're going to get because it's Mark Waid and he's like one of the greats. So it's just one of those things where like if you want to read a really good just spy Marvel book, then that's what you get. Because you sort of have tastes of that in the MCU with like Winter Soldier and stuff like that. That's especially Winter Soldier is definitely like an espionage tale.
Yeah.
But
and I'm hoping that's what Black Widow the movie is. It's a lot
just a straight up just spy thriller stuff. But
like,
but it's also a superhero movie, so it can be a little more ridiculous. That was the appeal of Winter Soldier.
Exactly. Moving on to the big one is basically their own Avengers, X-Men.
Oh, I had to think about this one.
Yeah, you had to think about this one?
I had to think about this one.
I knew you were going to choose this one.
X-Men,
it
eventually like settled on it because X-Men is tough. Yes. Because X-Men is not just one character. It might as well be its own universe, really.
It might as well be its own
There's
Marvel.
A whole lot of baggage as far as that is concerned. Because you do have like the most definitive storylines. Everyone loves like the Dark Phoenix stuff, the Chris Claremont run. And while that's great, it is sort of old and you do have a lot of baggage attached to that. Astonishing helps in that it was right after Grant Morrison had left, and they pretty much just wanted to retcon everything he did because he really tried to tried to train it. He really tried to like change it and try to evolve it, and it worked for that. But they weren't ready.
They never are.
And at that point, X-Men was really stagnant, so he actually gave it the shot in the arm that he needed. But what worked about Whedon's run was that it was back to basics, and you can just kind of jump in. Anything else you can just infer, like Jean Grey's been dead for a while, Scott and Emma Frost are together, and you're good, and you just move on from that.
Yeah, I absolutely. If you're a nerd, you probably know Joss Whedon, and you are. Just treat yourself to this.
Yes,
this is
you gave me the first volume of it as a birthday gift, like years ago.
It's an extremely well written X-Men story. If you want, like, Joss Whedon's perfect for this because it's full of just like quip, and it's just a bunch of X-Men quipping at each other for fucking a bunch of books. It's great.
He had sort of popularized decompression as far as comic book pacing is concerned too.
What do you mean by that?
Decompression is like, say you have one page and it's just 4 panels of the same face.
Yeah.
Like face, face, and then a singular expression changes for like comedic effect. That's decompression.
Yeah.
He had sort of like popularized that, and that's been like a staple of comics
ever since. Yeah, definitely. And I think you could send somebody into Grant Morrison's run, but damn, is it confusing sometimes. Like, it's definitely not the one to, like, start people
X-Men, Grant Morrison's X-Men is definitely not one to do because the entire point of it is that it's trying to upend what came before.
X-Men was,
And not in a way that it's, like, supposed to be a reboot, but in sort of almost like a Last Jedi sense where it's just, like, it knows what's there.
Yeah.
But now we have to get to the root of the problem with it and see what we can change.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you on this. Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men is fantastic. Jason Aaron's Wolverine is a great companion piece to Jason Aaron's Thor too. They're both very similar.
Wolverine at least has the benefit of that he's had other runs that like help. Like everyone loves the Frank Miller run on Wolverine.
I was gonna say Frank Miller's run is pretty up there, but
that's
so
also
that it feels like. Yeah, it's too. For a modern reader, it's just not going to play.
Yeah, it's always good to like start off with something modern just to become comfortable, and then if you're curious about the history, you can like go back and find trades and stuff of the classics.
I mean, it's funny because we're saying like arcs and starting points, but I would say my absolute favorite starting point for Wolverine is Wolverine versus Hulk in the woods. It's like a comic. It's a single fucking it's several battles. So it's like there's and
it's like adapted from a really old like Hulk story.
Yeah, it's
in case you didn't know, Wolverine was literally created to battle the Hulk. That's why he's so damn overpowered.
Yeah, and I love it. And if you and I think that's a great way to get into Wolverine though is read those books because you kind of get this like savage Wolverine feel at the same time as a great Hulk story, It's
shout out and rest in peace to Len Wein.
Yeah, Len Wein.
The creator. Also creator of Swamp Thing, who I'm a huge fan of.
Oh man, love Swamp Thing.
But yeah, that's what works about Wolverine. The appeal of Wolverine, and I've heard it distilled, it's like Clint Eastwood with claws.
Yeah. There's nothing not to like.
So that's why he works so well as a solo. He's like in his own like solo stories. Is because he sort of has like this mythic, almost man with no name type appeal, where he can just wander into stories and as like the gruff man and really fuck things up. Side tangent before we move on, if any of you guys are into like audio books or audio dramas and stuff like that, the Stitcher exclusive audio drama of Wolverine that they did and officially licensed by Marvel was fucking great.
Wow.
Richard Armitage, fucking Thorin Oakenshield from The Hobbit, voices him, and he's so good.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. So, before we move out of the superheroes, we got to talk about the big boys, crossover events. This is the stuff that is meant to catch your eye and get you back into comics. This is what is meant to be either start you on comics or get you back in, make you go, what are they doing now? What's up? So we got to start off with the big starter here, Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yes.
This is the event that started events.
Yeah.
You know, like sure there was events before, but this is how you view events now. This is what starts the modern event comic.
This is what event comics going forward are always compared to. Crisis on Infinite Earths was an initiative to sort of clean house as far as the DC universe was concerned.
Yeah.
And it brought in so many people. Not exactly everyone, because you have like thousands of characters to work with, but it brought in addressed different universes, different versions of many characters you hadn't seen in years, groups, factions, all for them to have like this huge team up where the universe is ending and they have one last stand. And then once that's done, we're back to basics.
Yeah. I love
it's
love
sort of like
book.
last hurrah for this version of the universe.
Yeah, and it kind of makes this standard of like you have to end the universe to make a new universe. It kind of like starts this standard that is standard not just in DC but in also Marvel. Like they got to end Ultimate Universe to like keep moving. You know, like but like this is one of those things that it's so classic that if you didn't read it. It may seem old now to read to modern readers, but you should read it now so you understand what DC's all the time referencing.
Yeah.
Like all the time
if you're trying to get into
comic.
DC in general and actually sort of want to keep up with the established like history, Crisis is going to come up a lot.
A lot. Like if the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor start here. Like this is the stuff that like DC's always referencing all the time. It's strictly because Jeff Johns' fault. It's like Jeff Johns loves Crisis on Infinite Earths.
To the point where he pretty much wrote a sequel to it.
Yeah, and nothing else touches Crisis on Infinite Earths. But we've had Crisis, we've had
Infinite Crisis,
we've had Final Crisis,
which is garbage.
But there's a few of those are pretty good. Final Crisis not so much, but everything else.
Yeah, Infinite Crisis is a solid event.
Yeah,
it's a little clumsy, but it works.
It works. It's why we say this is the one history lesson in all these books. Like we're trying to get the modern reader most of the time, but this is the one I go, okay, modern reader, fuck you, go read Crisis on Infinite Earths. You need to know it. Like it's important, and it's funny because I knew the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths before reading the book. Yeah. I knew what happened because you have to know what happens to like read the other books, but when I finally read it, I really understood how great this event was.
Yeah.
It's such a hoorah. It's such a love letter to DC and these superheroes, and it's one of the best deaths in comics. Supergirl's death in Crisis on Infinite Earths is single-handedly one of the best deaths in comics.
Yeah.
No question in my mind.
And this was really a shift.
Yeah.
Because Supergirl would be gone for a while. I think other than like the Power Girl, which is its own topic in and of itself because it gets wonky. But she was gone for a while, arguably until like Jeff Loeb did the Batman Superman book or the Superman Batman book. And same thing with, we brought up earlier, Wally West took Barry Allen's place as the Flash, and that lasted for 2 decades.
Exactly. So it's like one of those things where they set this precedent where they're just going to kill people and then they're dead. And Crisis kind of started that, where like we actually killed Supergirl and she's gone. So that's the history lesson. Now we kind of have to go to the crossover events that probably started it all. I love Civil War. For me, that was one of the comics that got me back into reading comics more often. I know this is 2006, so it's before I started reading weekly, but it still got me into like picking up trade paperbacks.
And it's an easy premise to be like, what do you mean Civil War? The heroes are fighting? What?
Yeah, it's such a simple concept. And that's why it works, is that it's such a simple, like, but why would they fight each other? Even your grandmother's like, why does Captain America hate the Iron Man? Aren't they friends? Not
anymore.
Not anymore.
But we've brought Civil War up a few times.
Yeah,
like,
we
on
will
other
not
episodes.
talk about it more.
Not too much. Like, at the end of the day, for me, it's a mess. It has really cool moments.
It's one of those reasons why I love splash pages. Is you would flip the page on Civil War, and pretty much every 2 pages you'd be like, what the fuck? And that's why I love that. And World War, Hulk leading into Civil War 2 also helps elevate that event even further for me. I love Civil War. I love how they were able to build up to it super well and then build out of it, because out of Civil War you have Dark Reign and so many other things, and I love Dark Reign. Dark Avengers is one of my favorite comic runs, but definitely not a starter comic, because they're like, did you know all of these villains? No, too bad. Too fucking bad. They're now the Avengers, and you're like, wait, hold on. But I love that. I love that run, and it leads into the next event. And all that. That's how it goes.
And the cycle and the wheel keeps turning.
The other event comic that got me into, so we have 2006 where I start reading comics, and then 2011 where me and you deep dive. Is Blackest Night. And Black, so I was reading all the Green Lantern stuff, and I was able to like catch up as Blackest Night like started to happen, and then it takes off into Brightest Day and all that shit. I love Blackest Night. It's a great starter comic because you're like, the characters that should be dead are dead.
Yeah.
But they're now back as zombies. So it's like, so you get introduced to old characters, but they're old, because they're fucking dead.
So,
zombies.
There's
no weird revolving door. It's like dead. Like gone.
So the appeal of Blackest Night is that the color spectrum as far as the lanterns are concerned had already been established at this point, but now we decided to do, or Jeff Johns decided to do,
white rings, which was life.
Yeah.
So obviously, what's a black ring?
Black Lantern is death. And so Black Hand starts bringing back like characters back from the dead and also establishing them as like Black Lanterns.
So why I love this is that it feels like it's always been there. Like is that like, if White Lantern creating life and helping life thrive, this had to be building too, and it feels so ethereal and huge in a way that is not just like it's a space alien thing. It's like it came from our planet, like sort of, like it's like it was fueled by our bullshit and the constant death and fighting of superheroes, and. What's so great about this is it's sort of in the same way fun of Marvel Zombies, where they're kind of having fun with the zombie part of it, like sure, some of them are unspeaking fucking monstrosities like they should be, but then some are a little bit smarter and can actually use their powers a little bit, and you have some fun there, and I love Blackest Night. I think it's so much fun and totally worth the read. But that's it for crossovers, because everything else is pick and choose. But they're harder to like.
And you're always going to have mixed feelings about event comics in general, especially now because they tend to come on a little too often.
And they're trying to shock you. You know, like, so that's why I choose these. Is these have fun shocks? These have fun, like, oh wow, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Why would Peter Parker reveal himself? But like, then you have some event comics where they're like, yeah, but then we murdered this whole team of superheroes for nothing. You know, like
no reason.
You know, like at least Civil War, they kill off that team at the beginning and it like sparks it. It's like a Franz Ferdinand moment.
Yeah.
You know, like at least there's something to these moments. You know, like. Okay, but moving on, we're out of superheroes now.
For the most part.
For the most part.
We have sort of like a sub-genre coming up, but we want to go into non-superhero stuff for a little bit.
Non-superhero stuff. First off, comedy.
Comedy.
So this is a hard thing. Comedy's always hard, if there's nothing else. So let's start off. We have Ghost World by Daniel Klaus. This... You've probably seen the movie. It's got Scarlett Johansson in it. Yeah. So it's a 90s movie.
This is a very like dry coming of age story.
It's one of those things that makes you realize it's a lot of these comics we're going to recommend are very true to life. You know, like a lot of comics can be fantastical, full of action and stuff like that. But Ghost World and a few of these other we're going to talk about here are very down to earth. Just literally telling a story from like a regular person's perspective. Yeah, you know, like
newsletter comics do that,
and
that's the thing. It's not just the superhero genre,
and I that's why I think Ghost World's so great. Is it's able to tell this like really personal story, you know, and it really plays super well. And I think the movie's a great adaptation of it too.
Yeah,
but, definitely the book is worth reading. Moving on to we're just going to start to get some more fantastical stuff right off the bat. Comedy.
We said we were going to stop talking about superheroes, and now we're going to talk about a superhero.
So we're going to talk about superhero. The Pro by Garth Ennis and Amanda Conner. This is the dirtiest comic you will ever read, and that's marking hentai down. You know, like no, I'm just kidding. You dirty pervs with the hentai.
We're not a Japanese tier.
We're not a Japanese tier. Where the Pro is. One of the most ridiculous concepts for a superhero. They're like, what if there was a super prostitute?
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
We summed it up. Review over. Moving on.
And
I'm just kidding.
And it's really fucking funny.
It's really fucking funny.
And if you're a fan of Garth Ennis's like sensibilities and his other work.
If you liked The Boys.
Yeah.
If you liked
Preacher. If you like his run on Punisher.
Yeah. If you like this like kind of fucked up, brutal humor,
but yet kind of funny.
Yeah, like kind of over the top funny. You're gonna...
Yeah, and it's a good time. And it's funny because like the superheroes that she interacts with in this book are totally the Justice League.
Yeah, totally just
but legally sane. And it's really ridiculous. And Amanda Conner's art, despite the machinations of this book being really disgusting, the art is fantastic because it's Amanda Conner.
This book answers the question, what happens when Superman has sex? And that's the reason to read this book anyway. Like, you know, like, you're always just like, wouldn't Superman kill a woman? You know, like,
so Garth Ennis, Amanda Conner, and then, like, Jimmy Palmiotti was on it, I don't think as a writer, but as, like, an inker. Yeah, because he's multi-talented. But I will never forget when you had him sign the copy of him because they were both at the convention and you had them sign the Pro. I will never forget him because you were like, I had to get the Pro signed. He's like, yeah, man, that's a classy book.
That's a classy book.
I have never forgotten that. That's a classy book.
Yeah, that's a way to sum up that book. So we won't get deep into the next one because we have a whole episode about it. Go check out our episode on Scott Pilgrim by Brian Lee O'Malley. Go check it out. We have a whole episode on it, so we won't even say any more, but just do it.
Yeah.
Next up, this one's kind of a wild one. Sex Criminals by Matt Fraction and Chip. Oh my God, say his name.
I think it's Zdarsky.
Yes, you're exactly right. That's how you say it. I just can't. Can you try to explain Sex Criminals?
So, Sex Criminals is about criminals.
Yes.
There's this guy and this girl who get together and they sleep together And what they find is at the moment of orgasm, they freeze time.
Yeah, we're getting dirty in here.
Yeah.
These couple comedy graphic novels, they get dirty.
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious. Sex Criminals is so fucking funny.
And then they use it to they're like, all right, so when we have sex, it freezes time. What if we used it to like rob banks and shit?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those comics that you see the title and it's surprising, and then somehow the title delivers. Like there's lots of comics that they have the title there and you're like, what the fuck? And then it's like not what the title is, but this is, like this is Sex Criminals. It's shocking, and then somehow still delivers such a ridiculous story, and it's a good story. That's what's great, is that like, sure, it's about stopping time with sex, but it also is like about their relationship and like how they it's like sort of a heist movie at the same time. It's totally
ridiculous.
worth reading.
And the name for the hardcovers are great.
Yes,
they call it Big Hard Sex Criminals.
Jesus Christ,
it's just like, damn it,
Big Hard Sex Criminals.
You guys are ridiculous.
My next one is a big favorite of mine, The Goon by Eric Powell. I'm a huge fan of this. It is The Goon and his buddy Frankie. Of course, I love a good character named Frank. And they basically are kind of like mobsters for a town, but they're good mobsters with good heart, and they fuck shit up and basically kind of just get into trouble, and it's totally worth reading. Eric Powell is a fantastic writer because he's able to keep this like dark tone that's going on of like kind of like a Hellboyish tone where it's like it's mythical and but it's still dealing with like two dudes who are like ridiculous mobsters, sort of, in a way, like silly mobsters, like stereotypical shit, but like it's full of great little stories. I absolutely recommend The Goon. I can't wait for a movie. They've been teasing it forever.
Yeah, didn't they have that like
David Fincher was attached?
Yeah, didn't they also have that like animated pilot that they tried to do and it didn't really lead to anything? Yeah,
which is stupid because that was beautiful. It looked great, and it had Paul Giamatti
I remember that.
attached.
Yeah, I remember that
So
years
good.
ago.
So backing away from comedy, going the opposite direction, crime.
Yeah.
Crime.
And with these genres, of course, there's going to be like crossovers, but you try to keep it fair because, hey, art is complicated.
Art is complicated. So, crime. Now, this one, this section here has some of my favorite writers of all time doing great things. First off, you have 100 Bullets by Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Rizzo. Holy shit. Is this one of those comics that just like catches you by the balls and doesn't let go?
Yes.
First off, Brian Azzarello, like sometimes when you read Stephen King books and he adds an accent to it and you're kind of like, Stephen King, you're being fucking cheesy.
Yeah.
Brian Azzarello actually fucking like researches the way the people talk and gets it perfect.
Yeah.
And he's able to add different accents to all these people, and it really adds this great depth to these characters.
Yeah, there's a sense of like tangible, unlike telegraphed grit in 100 Bullets. Something that doesn't feel forced or doesn't ring hollow, but feels true, but it's also not like nihilistic, and it doesn't make you feel like hopeless or anything.
Yeah. I love this book. I own, I think, the first 5 volumes of the trade paperbacks.
Yeah, it's one of those ones I really need to jump back into and like finish.
Yeah, I want to get like an omnibus thing. I want to
Yeah.
get a fucking huge book of this because I know they have them and it's so good.
I will say, when I first started watching the John Wick movies, one of the things it reminded me of was 100 Bullets in the way it tries to execute like this grander sense of lore, like in the background.
If you want something like John Wick in comic book form, 100 Bullets. Absolutely. Like, check that out. Moving on, you have some classic Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell, From Hell.
From Hell, which is, it's crime, it's horror, it's also historical. It's basically a graphic novel about Jack the Ripper.
Yeah. What more do you need to know? Like,
graphic novel about Jack the Ripper.
That's
Super
literally
well done.
it. That's the hook right there, and it hook, line, and sinker. This is a great one.
And it's so Like
this one, a Johnny Depp movie?
Yeah, it's garbage.
Yeah, it's garbage. Yeah, I was like, I haven't seen it because I hear it's garbage.
Yeah, it's bad.
I hear bad things.
But the book is just like so poignant and so literary. I know Alan Moore like did like years upon years of research to like get it down.
Yep. And if you're an Alan Moore fan, From Hell is a must read.
Yeah,
it's absolutely a must read. Moving on to. A teenage Frank would tell you his favorite comic book series. This was before I really got into comics, but Sin City was my shit. Sin City, like Guy Ritchie films, just fucking captured my fucking imagination as a kid, and I just wanted to make Sin City stuff. And then, of course, the movie came out in 2007, and they nailed it. You know, like I think Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller working together really pulled something off there. Great translation of a comic to screen.
Yeah, in a way where it's almost like 1-to-1 as far as a translation is concerned.
Yeah.
But it still plays on the advantages of being part of a new medium.
It's so amazing. It's one of those movies that I don't know if we'll ever get something like that again, because obviously we won't, because we have two examples of it going bad. We have Sin City 2, which it just was too far, too late.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It's a fine movie.
Yeah.
If you have to compare it to other movies, it's okay. But then you have The Spirit, which is literally Okay, so Frank Miller's on here a lot because he's amazing. He's incredible.
Or he used to be.
But the man needs to be reeled in sometimes. And I think that's what some of the editors in the 80s were doing. They reeled him in.
Yeah, plus it
90s,
was definitely a mistake to turn something like The Spirit, which was very like traditional pulpy like detective
I love
stuff.
The Spirit. If there's something that is not on this list that is a character that you should probably just get into because he's fun, the old Spirit comics.
The weird thing
so
about
much
The
fun.
Spirit was like Frank Miller trying to turn it into Sin City.
Yeah, where it was yes, the fun of The Spirit is it's a fun caper, but obviously there's like a dark underground under everything that's going on. That's with octopus and everything like that.
Yeah.
You know, like he gets certain things about The Spirit right, but overall, yeah, you can't turn it into Sin City and hope it just works.
Yeah.
You know, like that's just you sent it too gritty when it just and too I don't know, the tone's not right in the movie.
A movie that matches The Spirit more so in like turns as far as like aesthetic is concerned and tone would be like a Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
More so than a Sin City.
Exactly. And you're just kind of like, what the fuck? But tangent aside, the Sin City books are a fantastic read, and they just, first off, they look nice on your shelf. And then they're just nice to hold. They're fantastic art from page to page. Frank Miller at his absolute best.
Yeah, at his peak. Once you get out of the 80s, that's when it starts to get rough.
I think the cocaine ran out. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But it's like Dark Knight Returns and Sin City are just masterworks, and I think that you should check them out. And Sin City's a better jumping on point than Dark Knight, of course.
Yeah.
Moving on to one of my all-time favorite graphic novels of all time, and one of my all-time favorite movies, V for Vendetta.
Yeah, which is interesting because the movie's very different.
Very different. So, Alan Moore, David Lloyd kind of put this vision of authoritarian Britain and what it would look like if kind of like authoritarian communism kind of took over
the whole thing is like a metaphor for the Thatcher era.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge metaphor for the Thatcher era, and that's what's great about Alan Moore is sometimes you have to kind of know the history of what he's allegoring to be able to like, sure, V for Vendetta is a fun read, but if you don't know what he's fucking saying there, it's kind of, you know, you just get stuck with what we have now, where people just take the mask and they kind of run with whatever they feel it stands
get me started.
for.
So stupid.
So the book first off, the movie does a good job of adapting some parts of the book. They really do get certain scenes down really well, and
it's just one of those things where they're so independent of each other, despite one being an adaptation, that they work for their own thing. The big difference is that V for Vendetta is, like I said, a huge allegory for the Thatcher era.
Yeah.
V for Vendetta, and it's been said before, is pretty much an allegory for the Bush administration.
Yeah, yep. Especially with...
That shit ain't subtext, it's text. It's there.
It's there, especially with the cell stuff. You're just like, yep. yeah. That's the thing about V for Vendetta. It kind of keeps aging extremely well.
Yeah.
Which is sad. Because it shouldn't keep aging well. It should be like, wasn't that sad? We lived in that era?
It's a good thing that's so long ago.
Shit.
We just keep on making it relevant, huh?
But really, Alan Moore is the guy you use to get people into comics. You give them Watchmen. Because that will bridge that gap of I like reading books to I like reading graphic novels, because it is very much a novel. V for Vendetta is the same way, where it's saying and doing a lot. It is, and that's what's so amazing about it, is that the movie might be a fun romp and has some good action scenes.
Yeah, to be fair, it is deeper than your typical blockbuster.
Absolutely. But, of course, a book can go deeper.
Yeah.
And the graphic novel goes deeper. And also, leans more into the government part of it. Instead of it just being more about the media, they lean more into...
Yeah, and the book is definitely darker and isn't afraid to go to more uncomfortable places.
Yeah. I love it. I own it. I'll buy more copies of it if somebody gave me a nice copy. It's so good. Moving on to drama. This is where we get a little hard and heavy. But I have not read this one on this list.
Read this one?
I have not read Blue is the Warmest Color. I've seen the movie, obviously.
It's another case of very different.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Tell me.
Well, the thing about Blue is the Warmest Color is that the comic is inherently a tragedy story.
Yeah.
It's about one of the two women visiting the lover's funeral.
Yes.
After they've died and they've had their woes of how they first met, how they broke up, etc. The movie is a little more stark and surprisingly has a much sadder ending than the book does.
Yeah, it's a sad movie.
The book is more about coming to terms with what we had and how much more we could have had we talked to each other. It's one of those things you never know what you have until it's gone, etc. Losing a loved one. Whereas the movie is more just love is bullshit.
Love is bullshit.
And sometimes you fuck up, and sometimes there is no forgiveness. You miss your shot, you're never having it again.
This is, and it's a movie that is not afraid of anything.
No,
really.
no,
not at all. That's probably why most of our listeners know about it. It is not afraid to show anything.
It's a good movie, but it's rough to watch.
Moving on to one that was actually adapted into a movie too. Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This is usually everybody's first intro to a very serious graphic
novel.
Wasn't
it required reading in our graphic novel class?
Yes.
But I already read it, so I don't have to.
Yeah, I didn't have to read it. So this is a great story. It is a Holocaust story, but told with anthropomorphic animals.
Sorry.
I'm a dummy. And basically, these mice and what are the Nazis? Are they pigs? I forget which animal they are.
I can't remember. I think
I'm
cats.
Mixing it up with Animal Farm at the moment. But
yeah.
But Mouse is extremely good. It's definitely baby's first sad drama comic.
Yeah, the Nazis are cats.
Yeah, the cats. Yeah, of course, mouse and cats. But it is a very serious story with a great message and really great art. I am saying babies first because it's very people will hand it to people being like, look, isn't
yeah,
this crazy?
It's a very
like
accessible
it's super
version
accessible. I'm not saying
of
it's
like the
baby
tragedy,
in its storytelling in any way.
It's using like the animals to its advantage in the same way that like
Yes.
Animal Farm does, or like Fantastic Mr. Fox, both
Yep.
like the book and the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this book, but it's one of those things that it's become so popular that it's like it's too much. You know, like I love this book. It's great. And the movie's good too. The movie's great too. It's one of those things that's so popular, you've heard it so much. And you're just kinda like that. Moving on to, I'm going to mispronounce
Persepolis.
Persepolis. This is a fantastic read.
Yeah, you want to talk about True to Life.
Oh, True to Life. So well done. And also, if we're talking about a movie that translates exactly the comic, that movie directly does the whole comic. The whole thing. Nothing's left out. If you don't even have to read the comic. I know I'm an asshole for saying this, but go watch the movie.
Yeah. We also have a similar
good.
thing with the Batman Year One animated movie where it's just like, it's the comic.
It's the comic.
You basically watched it, but you also read it.
Except I think it's even more for this, because at least with Year One, there's different art style. Like, you know, when you're going from movie to the book. This one is literally just the art from the book translated on screen.
As far as premise is concerned, because we went into the premises for the other ones, Persepolis is another like coming of age story.
Yep.
It's about like a young girl from like childhood to adult while she's living in Iran, like pre and post the Islamic Revolution.
Yep.
And it's interesting to see it from like a child's perspective as they grow up. And again, very true to life, and sometimes pretty hard hitting.
Yeah, it gives a fantastic
perspective,
women's perspective. I love this book. It touches your heart. It talks to you. It's a great one. I absolutely recommend this book and movie. And two, it has a sequel, and it's very good. Have you read the sequel?
I haven't read Persepolis 2, no.
It's good. You would think like where the hell is she going from here? And it's another great story. It's just another continuation on. The next one in drama. Have you read this one? Have you read Fun Home?
No.
So I was given this one. Alison Bechdel. It's another true story. It's about this woman that grows up in a funeral home. Her parents own a funeral home, and she basically grows up in it. And that's why it's called Fun Home. It's a funeral home, you know, like, so, get it? And it's full of dark humor, and but it also is a coming of age story that, you know, you can just connect to, you know, like, I would put it almost in the same, like, coming of age as like, as a Lean on Me, you know, like where it's like dealing with dead bodies. But
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me. Sorry, not Lean on Me.
Lean on Me is the Morgan Freeman movie where he fixes the school.
Yep, wrong one.
Watched that way too many times at school because I lived in a shitty neighborhood.
Really?
It was like the ultimate. It was the ultimate. Just like, we can get out of this. Hey, kids. Just like, no, this town sucks.
Fun Home, absolutely recommending. Moving on to fantasy as a genre, and to one of your favorite comic books of all time. I would say
I snuck in a little manga in a few places because, I mean, they're comics too. It's just from a different country.
Comics too?
So, Berserk. So, Berserk is one of those...
I've not read all of this, so I can't give a full opinion on this.
I am up to date.
Yes. I know you
are. Berserk is one of those things where the thing about manga is that I don't read it too often because as a cultural thing over there, they tend to be so close as far as anime is concerned most of the time that I don't feel like I need to read it. With Berserk, it was the first time I felt forced to read the manga because I kept feeling like I was getting dicked over.
Something was wrong.
Yeah, because you had like the 96 anime, which I enjoyed. But it finished right before it started to get good because it had nothing to adapt. Then years later, they adapt that same arc again as 3 movies, and that worked. And there was supposed to be more to continue the rest of the arcs.
Yeah. Nothing.
Then they didn't. And then you got the 2016 anime. That happened. And not only did it look like garbage, but it like skipped essential stuff. I was watching it confused because there was context in the manga that I wasn't getting.
Interesting.
And I'm like, so at that point, I'm like, fuck it, I'll just read it because I love everything about this. I'm just not getting the full experience. So then I read it a few years ago, back when I was still living in Holyoke. I just like fucking plowed through all of it. It's not for the faint of heart. Like I put it in here as a recommendation, but just as far as like content warning is concerned, we're talking like explicit violence, like sexual assault, like all the nitty and gritty stuff. It is edgy to the point where sometimes it's almost comical.
Yeah,
but
too far.
But it's unflinching.
There you go. I love the art style in it.
Oh, the art is sort of like the best part about it. The writing's already good, but I can show you like panels and pages and stuff like that that you want to put on your wall.
It's fantastic. The next one on this list is one that I just don't read. I do not read fables.
I remember you saying you didn't like fables. It just kind of came.
It kind of seems like furry shit to me.
It kind of came and went for me when it first came out.
offensive.
It kind of like came and went for me when it first came out. I just didn't know what to think of it. I didn't even know what the premise was. But then I went through a whole binge where I started playing like Telltale games.
Ones.
I played The Wolf Among Us. That was like one of my favorites. And I just played it knowing that it was part of the Fables thing, but everyone says it was accessible. And it was, because it's like a prequel that takes place in the 80s. And I fucking loved it. I loved like the reimagining of like fairy tale stuff as like gritty noir and how things like cross over about how like these fairy tale like icons and creatures and people actually exist in the real world, and they used to live in a fantasy world. Now they're forced to like live in like real life New York in like their own separate borough away from like the normal humans.
Oh, that's cool.
And that was dope. So I played the game, fucking loved it. So then I was just like, now I really want to read the book. And that was another thing I like plowed through. I think I did it right after Berserk actually.
Yeah.
Was just like I just went through all of it, and it was great.
It's like my problem with it's the reason why I haven't watched Beastars. You know, like it's just like there's I don't like the humanoid but animal thing. Like sometimes I'm okay with it. Like Zootopia, I'm like, okay, it's still an animal. I get it. But then when it starts to be this, I know I said it earlier, but furry shit where it's like, oh, it's got a human body but an animal head, you're kind of like, you're like, oh, I don't like this.
I mean, as far as Japan is concerned, it's kind of a drop in the bucket.
Yeah,
so.
of course, it is just a drop in the bucket. And Bill Willingham is a fantastic writer. I've read stuff by him.
And to be fair, there's not really much of it. There's like the stuff with like Bigby and like Snow White. But that's kind of it for the most part. It's only because like the main character is literally Bigby Wolf, the big bad wolf.
Yeah.
But that's about as far as it goes.
All right. Maybe I'll stop my prejudice and maybe read it.
Yeah, read the first volume. See how it sticks with you.
Next up is one of my favorite comics, Hellboy.
This was definitely one I put in more for you because you've read more than I have.
I've read so much fucking Hellboy. So it's funny that you say that it takes fairy tale, like you liked Fables because it takes fables and changes them.
Mm-hmm.
I love Hellboy because it takes ancient, like, fables, like little things. Like little,
it takes like ancient like myths and old wives' tales and stuff like that, and sort of brings them to the forefront. It gets like really abstract and like
really
Lovecraftian.
Sometimes it's like weird little like street stories you've heard, like that Hellboy's dealing with.
Yeah, I would describe Hellboy as like in a lot of places like very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, I would say so. And Mike Mignola's art brings that Lovecraftian feel and look, with the tentacles and the big arm on Hellboy. You probably know Hellboy from the movies. The second movie does a good job of capturing
both the Guillermo del Toro movies are solid for what they are.
Yeah.
They didn't quite nail the tone, and I think what the first movie sort of suffers from the most is that it's trying really hard to be Men in Black.
Yeah.
Because the thing about Hellboy in the comics is that all the creatures and stuff, as fantastical as they are established and not like secret or in the shadows. And it's all about Hellboy visiting other places, like ruined castles and haunted villages and stuff like that. With the movie, especially the first one, they try to like keep it like real street level.
Now that I'm reading The Witcher, it's kind of Hellboy is basically The Witcher.
Yeah,
you know, like
definitely.
It is basically like you've heard this old wives' tale before. Here's a twist on it. It's like absolutely what Hellboy is. You know, like it's totally worth the read. There's so many that you could pick up any Hellboy and probably get what's going on. Yeah. So I absolutely say any Hellboy book, pick it up. Moving on, I don't think I read this.
This is real recent, and this was like a real recent read for me. I read like the first 2 volumes. Oh. It's called Monstrous. It's by Marjorie Liu. And what I really wanted to find was like something epic fantasy besides Berserk. Something that was a little more accessible and not as explicit. It's an Image comic, because Image is killing it with like the indie stuff. Yep. It's in this sort of like alternate history, like steampunk, like Asiatic sort of country. And it's like Art Deco, but steampunk, but horror. And it's about like the war between like these 2 races. Super well done. The art is great.
I will have to check it out. I didn't know anything about it. So next up is one of my favorite comics and surprises in comics I've ever read. I picked up Preacher knowing nothing. This was way before there was a show. This is back when we started reading comics in 2011. Picked up Preacher, and I remember reading the first book and just being blown away. So basically, Preacher is the story of a preacher who receives the power of God or the word of God. He can tell... He can command somebody to do anything that he wants them to do. And, of course, that leads to craziness. And basically, he hunts down God.
Yeah, he's on a cross-country road trip to literally and figuratively find God alongside like his crazy girlfriend and an Irish vampire.
And Arseface. Yeah. Eventually. And I love... I don't care about the show.
Show's bad.
The show's bad. I hear the show fucks it up. The book is just one of those things that constantly keeps surprising you. You have no idea where this book is going ever. Ever. And it just, I love it. I think that this is one of those that it's up there with Watchmen and V for Vendetta for me, and just like, this is a fantastic comic that will blow your fucking socks off.
Yeah.
But Preacher's so fucked up that I don't exactly recommend it to everybody.
It's not quite Berserk bad, having like read all of both.
Yeah,
but it does get fucked up. It gets pretty fucked up.
I mean, we're dealing with Garth Ennis here. This is the guy who earlier we talked about the Pro.
Like you sort of know once you like read one Garth Ennis book, you sort of like know what he's all about. This is about so it helps to better prepare yourself for it.
I love Preacher. I can't say it enough. This was one of those things that I remember reading the first volume and then checking out the second and then just demolish this series. And you will too the minute you pick it up. Borrow it from your local library. I'm sure it's there. It's fucked up.
Yeah, that's what we did.
It's great. Moving on to a fantastic modern series that's still going on. Saga.
Saga by Brian K. Vaughan. Who will show up later.
It will show up later. This is sci-fi.
I put it in fantasy for the most part just because it's kind of like that blend in the same way that like Star Wars is, where it's mostly fantasy tropes but in like sci-fi drag.
Yeah.
Saga sort of has the same thing.
Yep. But you know, if Preacher is surprising and unexpected, Saga, you literally have no idea what you're about to witness on the next page.
It is this ongoing space epic that's like a cross between like Game of Thrones and Star Wars, but like also grittier and funnier than either, and it's actually an appropriate comparison to the two as opposed to it just doing it because it has grit.
Yeah, and it's extremely funny, surprising. The visuals are top notch.
Oh yeah, Fiona Staples' artwork is incredible. And it's driving me crazy because it's on like hiatus right now. It's like on a break. This was before like COVID had like start to hit. And they've been on break for like 2 years now, and I'm just waiting for
Yeah,
it to
give
come
it to
back.
me.
But they said they have a set end game. They know exactly what issue it's going to end on. Like, they're still mapping it out while they're on hiatus, which is nice. And yeah, it already feels like a saga because it's already taking place over the span of years. It has a great sense of humor. The art is incredible.
Fantastic narrator.
And there are some points, because it's Brian K. Vaughan, where it just hits like a damn truck. You want to talk about sequential art and like the effect of a page. It's like a page turn. There's this whole segment in one of the issues, which I won't give away, but it involves black pages, and it will break your heart.
Yeah, it's so good. Moving on to horror and to another series that's still ongoing right now, American Vampire by Scott Snyder and Raphael.
Which was just announced. It's going to be wrapping up soon.
So if you love vampire stories, this is the comic to get.
Yeah.
No question. There's lots of vampire stories in comics. This is the best one. No question. This is what if vampires existed in America and just kind of flourished the way any society does.
Yeah, it's like
America.
a history of vampires via like Americana.
Yeah, and it is such a great twist on the comic on vampires in the same way that any great vampire story does. It takes the rules and twists them slightly, and you love it.
Yeah.
But the funny part is it's not all the vampire action that drives this. It's the interactions between the characters that really move this story.
And it really deals with the themes that you want to get when it comes to a vampire story, especially one that spans like years and years and decades in this case. Is just like coming to terms with immortality, watching your loved ones die, etc., trying to keep that humanity in a character like Pearl, who's more or less the main character of the book, or someone who's just completely abandoned it like Skinner Sweet.
Yeah, Skinner Sweet.
Skinner Sweet is like one of the best comic book like antagonists or anti-heroes that you don't know about.
Oh my god. Yeah, if you don't know, it's like American Vampire to me is the next big Netflix series, and they don't know it.
And as far as
like this thing's, if done right, this could take off for years.
Yeah, and as far as incentive is concerned, if you're a Stephen King fan, he co-wrote the first volume with Scott Snyder.
God, I forgot about that. That was the first drag in. You're like, what? Stephen King's writing a comic book
he
with
co-wrote.
Scott Snyder?
Yeah, he co-wrote
like,
it with Snyder for the first volume, and then Snyder was on his own from that point forward.
But it's so fucking good. I can't recommend this book enough. Horror wise, it brings the chills. Like it actually brings some horror to vampires. Actually, totally worth it. So next up is something I have only read snippets of because it's so goddamn scary sometimes. Can you pronounce these words?
Yeah, Gyo. I put two on here by the same author, either Gyo or Uzumaki by Junji Ito. The easiest thing about this one is that all you have to do to get a recommendation, if you're into the horror genre, is literally Google Junji Ito art, and then you'll know why you'll want to read it.
Yeah, this is horrifying art. This is art that like elicits a disgusted response, but like, and also it's so well done. Like it's so
detailed and so
nightmares,
primal, and it only so far has worked in that medium, because there was an adaptation of his work before called the Junji Ito collection, and it just did not translate.
Didn't fit well. And I know they've always tried to do his stories as movies.
They also announced that like they're going to be doing an anime adaptation of Uzumaki, and I'm like, if it's anything like the Junji Ito collection, it's not going to work. But if they can do it, it'll be something special.
It'll be, because it's absolutely horrifying. He's the guy who does the one where there's a hole in the wall that's exactly your size. Yeah, that story fucks me up, bro. Fucks me up. Like, talk about horror that, like, reaches into something deep inside you that you didn't know you were afraid of, and then just rips it the fuck out, and you're like, I didn't know I was afraid of that, but I'm afraid of that now. Like, you're just like, oh, shit. He is a fantastic writer and artist. It's so fantastic. I love it. Moving on to one of my favorite horror comics. The horror genre here is full of some of my favorites.
Yeah.
Here. This is another one where you're just like, damn, this is so damn good. Saga of the Swamp Thing by Alan Moore and...
there have been a few.
There's been a few people.
There's like Stephen Bissett. There's been a bunch of artists on it. That's why I didn't narrow it down.
If you know or like Swamp Thing, it's because of this run.
Yeah.
It's because of this run. This run is a classic. This is true. It's funny because it's a DC comic, but it's not in any way.
Yeah, it does
like,
take place in that universe, but in like the shadowy part that you don't get to see, one that doesn't really deal with the superhero stuff for the
same
most
thing
part.
with the next one, the Sandman.
Yeah.
But like the both of them are like in the DC, but not.
Yeah.
And I love that. First off, that's a great aspect.
So the appeal of Swamp Thing is that it almost feels like this classic, ethereal, almost like
story,
very almost like a universal monster.
I didn't mean to be created, but I am. You know, like if you love Universal monster movies, you're gonna love this.
There was already a run with Swamp Thing with the original creator Len Wein, and it was more just like sort of like a horror adventure type thing, and then it started to like lose its luster, but then Wes Craven had made the Swamp Thing movie, which is really fucking bad.
Yeah.
But it drew attention back to it, which is the best thing that it could have done for it. Len Wein contacted Alan Moore to like sort of revitalize the comic, and the first thing Alan Moore did was like establish that like the Swamp Thing is not Alec.
Yeah. It's like, and that's what's interesting about it, is it's not like, this is not a superhero who transforms into a Swamp Thing. This is different. This is something.
He's not more. Alec Holland. He's like a shadow, a shade of a man who once be. He's just his own creature, and he needs to come to terms with that.
And of course, it's Alan Moore, so he's just waxing poetically about like man and the nature of man, while Swamp Thing's going around fucking ripping people apart.
And the thing you don't realize about Swamp Thing is like, it was a big plant monster. What makes that interesting? Swamp Thing is an overpowered motherfucker. Especially if you read like the New 52 stuff.
Oh my god, he's so overpowered.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't bring up Animal Man in New 52. That's one of my favorite getting
into
comics.
We were talking about like jumping points for major characters.
Yeah, so Animal Man doesn't come up, but that's some good stuff. We won't even talk anymore. Just New 52, Animal Man, Jeff Lemire. Holy shit, go read that. Also, Scott Snyder, Swamp Thing.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yannet Paquette was...
Yeah, and then Charles Soule's run right after that was also really good.
So good. So good.
Swamp Thing has pretty consistently good runs.
Yeah, it's funny because you're like, who's Swamp Thing? But then they throw these heavies at Swamp Thing for good reason, because it's fantastic.
It helps that Swamp Thing's not that big a character, so you can like experiment a little more, because if he was too big for his own good, then it would become more restricted.
So this one, the next up, The Sandman by Neil Gaiman, is one of my favorite graphic novels, comics, books ever. Period. And this is fantastic.
So premise-wise, this takes place in the DC universe, but also it feels weird that it does in the same way that Swamp Thing does. There was this whole movement, which they like called the British movement, like they did for like the Beatles and like other UK bands that came over, but for comics, the British Invasion, where it was just heavy hitters like Alan Moore on Swamp Thing.
Grant Morrison.
It's like you had the Hellblazer comics. You had Grant Morrison, and you had Neil Gaiman on The Sandman.
Yep.
The Sandman is this horror book about these godlike beings called the Endless, like dream, desire, delirium.
It's
destiny.
It's kind of a very ethereal story.
Yeah.
Like it's all up there in concepts and thoughts. That's what really drives this.
Yeah, it's all about like dreams and the world of dreams, and almost like a meta commentary on like the nature of storytelling, etc. Like it's such a broad concept, and Neil Gaiman purposely made it that so that he could more or less tell whatever story he wanted
to, and he does. And this, I can't state enough how great like if I was talking up the Preacher comic, I cannot talk enough up the Sandman comic. Just read it. Just
read it. I'm sure you're going to want to when they inevitably get that Netflix series like off the ground.
So what's crazy is that I always think about that Sandman's one of my favorite series, but also in Sandman I have favorite stories, you know, like, and one of them is The Diner. The Diner...
Yeah, the Dr. Destiny stuff in Volume 2.
Dr. Destiny stuff is the reason why this is in the horror section, I feel like. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
It's one of those stories that just like it touches every part of you, and you're like, oh, I don't like that at all. Like,
and
no, that was horrifying in a deep way.
a good jumping on point is that if you're a fan of prose already, Audible did just come out with the Sandman audiobook.
Oh, there you go.
And it is a one-to-one adaptation of the comic, and then what you can adapt in comics because it's a visual medium is filled in by Neil Gaiman narrating.
That's awesome.
And apparently the narration that was written was mostly like what he wrote to the artists.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
See, that's fantastic. That's like reading a script right there.
Yeah, it's super good. It's literally an audio drama with like a full-on cast. James McAvoy plays Dream. You have like big hitters and stuff like that. Michael Sheen is Lucifer. Man. It's great.
That's so many. So I love this, but we have to move on. Sci-fi, Bitch Planet. I don't remember much about Bitch Planet.
This is new.
Okay.
Yeah. By Kelly Sue DeConnick. So it's like
great.
Yeah, it's this sci-fi book that's sort of a wink and a nod into subversion of like exploitation films, especially regarding women in prison.
Of course.
It takes place on its own like prison planet that's like completely populated by women, but it's written as like this satirical thing and actually written by a woman, so you actually have that point of view, and it's wild.
That's crazy. Moving on to Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan, again, coming up. He's going to come up again in a second.
If you wanted a comp title for Paper Girls, think R-rated Stranger Things, but sci-fi.
Yes. Yeah. Do I even need to say anymore? That is such a good selling point. R-rated Stranger Things with all-female cast.
Yeah.
There's nothing more. It's one of those things that you read the comment and you go, Netflix should buy this. Because this is their same vein of Stranger Things.
I forget who had it. I forget
Somebody
who
does.
I think Amazon does.
Which it's going to be great. It's such a good book. I hope they don't mess it up because it's such a great book. It's so well done.
Preacher fucked up so bad that like any adaptation of like these more indie comics, I'm always like worried about.
You're like, oh, what are you going to fucking do? You think you can do anything with it? Moving on to another one by Brian K. Vaughan, Why the Last Man? Now, this is his crowning achievement.
Yes.
Saga's fantastic, but why
that's also still going.
But Why the Last Man is complete, finished.
You need to read the rest of it.
I need to finish it. But it's funny, I had a status from 2012 being like, I just got it from yesterday, being like, Why the Last Man Volume 2 is another masterpiece. And it's just like me being like, masterpiece. Because it is.
It's a post-apocalyptic story about a man and his monkey being the only two surviving males on the planet Earth, and them taking like a cross-country road trip to potentially maybe find a cure for the plague that killed every male.
Men.
And it's not even just men; it's like every male species on the planet for every type of like animal also died.
It is wild, and of course, there's big questions there.
Yeah, there's big
how
questions.
Did they all die?
It's funny. It's like satirical, it's heartbreaking, and it's so close to home. Even though like the first comic especially is like decades old now, that is like so relevant. Like the Amazons as an extremist group. Every time I read about that, I'm just like, that would totally happen.
Totally. I love that they cut off their breast and then hunt people down. You're like, shit.
And they think of like the men dying was like divine retribution or something. You're like, that'd probably happen.
Why Last Man is so good. The show will be great, I'm sure.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Now, the next genre you have on here is superhero subversive.
Yes.
Now, this, I know we're going back to superheroes, but this is things that you can get into comics by reading them, but they are subversive of the superhero genre.
Yes.
They are taking them apart as we're looking at them, So we already talked about it a little bit. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller and Klaus Janson.
So this predates Year One. Year One was in universe. Dark Knight Returns is a standalone story in its sort of its own universe, even if the comics tried to like make it canon, but didn't really work that way. And it's sort of like a last, like, final Batman story. It's a Bruce Wayne who's been retired for, like, 10 years, comes back into the fray, into a world that's much worse than, like, the Gotham of old. And it came out at a time where Batman comics, while starting to be on the up and up because you had stuff by, like, Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil, we're still, like, stuck in that, like, Batman 60s.
This is so much fun.
Yeah, we think of him as, like, a sillier character. And this
and
sort
Dark
of, like,
Knight
really
Returns
brought it back.
Sends it gritty.
Yeah.
Real gritty. This is when when I say my favorite superhero comic, when people ask me, not many people, but when you ask me about what's my favorite superhero comic, it's Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. I've read this book. I don't reread comics that often, even though I own them. I do sometimes reread them. I have reread The Dark Knight Returns again and again and again and again. I love this book.
Yeah, I read it like once every couple of years.
It's so well done, and talking about formatting, Frank Miller plays with the formatting of the comic here and the panel design. It is just, it's great. It's so well done,
and you can see its influences on like adaptations, not only going forward in comics, but even in movies.
Absolutely, you basically see the end fight of Dark Knight Returns and Batman vs Superman.
Yeah,
basically. I will praise this all day, but moving on to other subversive things, Irredeemable by Mark Waid and Peter Krause. This is What's If Superman's Bad?
Yeah, but it's not directly a Superman story, so they can afford to go really hard on it. And it was almost like Mark Waid's sort of like middle finger, because I think Mark Waid had sort of
been working on Superman for a while.
He had been working on Superman for a while. He's known to be like an avid Superman fan, and people sort of thought like that's the only thing he could write. They tried to like put him in a box, so it's almost as if like Irredeemable was like a subversion of that. It reminds me of an episode of Buffy. Buffy had been so successful at that point that Joss Whedon was criticized for like using dialogue as a crutch.
That he did a silent episode.
And only being able to write like clever characters. So he wrote an entire silent episode and it was one of the best of the series.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to be like,
flex
fuck
on him.
you.
Flex on him. And Mark Waid can flex on him. Irredeemable almost feels like an endless series like Walking Dead, but it does end.
Yeah, it's been over for years.
It is a fantastic read. Mark Waid's on this list a lot because he is one of the greats. If we had to make a list of the great writers in comics, Mark Waid would be on the list. And he flexes it in Irredeemable because he's without consequences. You know, like it's his own universe, so he can do whatever the fuck he wants. And I have a bunch of these comics, and then he had an offshoot of this too.
Incorruptible,
which was a lot of fun too. But was more in line with what you would expect. Irredeemable was more just like,
well, it's about like the greatest superhero in the world, like going bad. Incorruptible was like the flip of that, like one of the world's greatest supervillains trying to be good.
Yeah, which fun. I own a lot of it. It's good stuff. So we have a whole episode on the next one. Superman Red Sun by Mark Miller and Dave Johnson. This is great.
Yeah, it's great. Super Soviet Superman. You want more details, basically listen to that episode.
We go into the comic too.
Yeah, as well as the animated film.
But it's not a great way to get into Superman, but it is a great Superman story that tells the whole thing, so you don't need other Superman stories.
This is why it works as like in this sort of subcategory of like deconstructive or subversive superhero stories, but not a good jumping on point.
And now we have the one you obviously knew was going to be on this list. Watchmen. We will talk about Watchmen much deeper later. We are planning a big Watchmen episode. Big episode covering everything on Watchmen. We're doing a lot of research. But basically, to sum it up, there's a reason why this is on the top 100 novels of all time list for Time magazine and many other lists. This is the book that breaches graphic novels into novels. Yeah. This is the graphic novel that's almost too good. It's so well done, so well put together. It made Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons household names. Like it's one of those things that I can't praise this book enough.
Yep. I am currently preparing for the episode to come in the middle of rereading it again, and there's just stuff you pick up on as you get older. You have a completely different perspective, but we will definitely get into it with that episode.
I say that I reread The Dark Knight Returns. I often reread Watchmen. Yeah. It's just one of those that you're kind of surprised how good the writing is the whole time. Even though you shouldn't be, it's Alan fucking Moore, you're just sitting there being like, damn, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, that's good. But we'll get into it at some point.
Yep.
But
it'll be big.
Basically, do we have anything else you want to cover?
I was just going to go sort of rapid fire for personal favorite books to jump into or artists and writers.
I mean, rapid fire. You got to get. You got to
read. Most of the writers listed already in the recommendations
Absolutely
are good. Ones that are on here, etc. Like Brian K. Vaughan, Scott Snyder. As far as female
Frank
writers,
Miller,
like Gail, you can't go wrong with Gail Simone.
Mark Miller. Yep, Gail Simone.
As far as artists are concerned, I love Amanda Connor. I love Alex Ross.
Raphael Albuquerque.
As far as Raphael Albuquerque is great. J.H. Williams III is changing the game.
Yep, seriously.
Yeah.
Like changing it. And Greg Capullo, of course.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And then, as far as books or runs are concerned, I said that All-Star Superman is my favorite comic, and it is. It's great. It's a standalone Superman story. It's basically about Superman dying slowly.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the death of Superman. This is a death of Superman done right.
Not the death.
And it's about, like, what Superman leaves the world when he's gone. And he goes through, like, all these trials. And it's this beautiful mix of, like, coming to terms with, like, a character like that. But it's also not afraid to get, like, Silver Agey and Weird. Beautiful story. Great art by Frank White.
Beautiful story.
Yeah, it's the quintessential Superman story. But it's not good to jump in just on its own.
No.
Familiarize yourself with Superman, then read it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that. Another thing I would say to pick up on for new readers, but also some old readers wanted to come back. There was the what were those Earth 1 books that were coming out for a while for DC? Those were really fun.
Yeah.
Great way to get into comics.
Those are good. It's almost like DC's answer to the Ultimate books in a way, especially when the Ultimate...
Which Ultimates is a great way to get into comics also. If you want to read something that's not exactly the same, but a little bit darker, Ultimates is a great way to get into it. We
actually had a huge omission for major characters. We didn't have a Spider-Man recommendation.
Oh, fuck me sideways.
I would say, off the top of my head, a good jumping point for Spider-Man would either be Ultimate by Brian Bendis.
Yeah.
That way you get like a good distilled version of Peter, and you get Miles. And then probably after that, you could have like the old McFarlane stuff from the 90s.
Yep.
And then you could have Dan Slott's run.
Yeah. Dan Slott... Of course, it was going to be great, but it's great.
I'm out of the loop as far as Spider-Man now. I hear like Nick Spencer's current run on Spider-Man is really good. Everyone seems to be loving it.
I'm a huge sucker for Superior Spider-Man. That's obviously not a good jumping on point, but it is one of my favorite comics because it's such a great subversion in the same way that Dark Knight Returns is a subversion. You know, like you're just like, oh, I didn't expect this to come. And so good.
But that's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it. But the thing is, I've been reading Spider-Man for so long, it's kind of hard for me to be like, this is a good starting point, but those are good starting points. If you, like me, had been reading it forever, those are good ones.
Yeah.
But guys, thank you for listening in. I hope this was helpful to you guys. I know this was a big one. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it gets you into comics.
Yep.
And you know the deal. Subscribe to our podcast. Check out our website. Check us out on Twitter. I'm Frank.
I'm Mod Karaika.
And basically, we want to yell at you about comics on Twitter, so hit us up.
You could even ask us about like characters that we didn't mention, and we could probably
if we missed something, I got something.
And we could
for
potentially like find a good like starting point for a character we didn't mention because we can't mention everyone.
Oh yeah.
Or for a particular genre you don't feel like we covered.
Yeah, absolutely. Please reach out about recommendations because we got tons of them.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.